Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome in. Welcome to the Shakespeare Show. Of course, hosted by me, Shakespeare, or Shakespeare, whichever you'd prefer. Can you suggest a song? Sure. I don't know if I could use it though, because it has to be. Uh, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm actually rather excited to be talking about the history of Christianity in the Near East. Oh, it's copyright? Oh, okay. That's the only thing. Like, I can't play it as the. Now, I know there's a way to do it so that on Twitch it doesn't get counted, but on YouTube, that's where it's always an issue. So, hello, PB. Welcome in. Welcome in. It's very nice to see you. India represent for sure. For sure. So we're going to be discussing with Boy Meets Mini, very, very good friend, best friend of the VOD. We're going to be discussing the history of... Thank you. And we're going to be discussing, again, the history of Christianity in the Near East. And then we are also going to be looking at it in a much more particular aspect when I look at it from... looking at it in terms of focusing on Lebanon. Hello, Boy Meets Mini. Welcome, welcome in. Yeah, take your time, take your time. So first, I just wanted to go over... And also, hello, Estelle. It's good to see you. And yes, Estelle and I ourselves plan on discussing something. We're not quite sure yet, but we know it'll be something. Let's see here. Two guest stream back to back. I mean, hey, if Estelle wanted to, I don't know much about anything. No, I mean, like, even if it was like a react to What If Alt His slated video, hey, I'd be down for that. That's, you are selling yourself short. It is true. You do know a lot of things. Because I remember like VC conversations where you're like coming in with like direct quotes that I'm like which is always nice, so let me stop this music here, and while Boy Meets Mini is getting ready, we're gonna watch just a very short video. But it's something that I think is very important given everything that's going on in the Middle East. Right? Gothic Bunny, hello. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's going great. You had to skip yours because I got a party to go to with my girlfriend. Oh, have a nice time. Have a nice time. Glad to hear it. So, this is talking about Israel's Maronite community. So again, this is like a little bit of a discussing a little bit of what will be discussed a little bit later once we get into it, but I did just want to watch it just because it's short enough.
Stuck between a rock and a hard place, or in this case, stuck between two enemy borders. The Maronite Christian community in Israel is home away from home.
IDF is Israeli Defense Forces to recruit and enlist and encourage our youth to go and serve.
So I'm just going to say one thing. Look, awesome Christmas tree, great. This is many different qualifiers. I'm sure that it's fine to call it the Israel Christian, like it's fine, but I feel like there could be like a community word for this. I don't know. Because like when I hear Aramaic, I don't think of the language. I mean, pardon me, I think of the language, not of the not necessarily of the community. So I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but
positive Christian model, accepting the state as it is, as a Jewish democratic state, at the same time asking for equal rights as a Christian native Aramaic Maronite community.
like that's kind of like a weird thing to say. I mean, and I don't mean in a negative sense. I mean when he himself is saying a Jewish and slight bit of a lag, not much. Okay. That
Historically considered Lebanese.
Oh, I think I know what happened. What happened? Hello, Daymel. Welcome in. Hoot hoot. I know what it is. It's because I see the bars going up and down. So it's just a little minor thing. But anyway, I find it a bit interesting that Maronites who have historically held a great sway of power in Lebanon are trying to then say, oh, well, you know, Israel is the only state that we feel safe in. And then they say the thing that makes it undemocratic, right? They're like, oh, it's a Jewish state. But, you know, but we still want our rights as a minority community, right? But I don't know. It's just one of those things. And by the way, a good portion of this community actually used to live on the other side of the border at one point. But because of reasons due to the civil war in Lebanon, because they collaborated with the Israelis, I'm not saying all of them, some of them moved to the other side because essentially they were the ones that let the IDF cross the border into Lebanon by essentially holding open the door, so to speak.
Christians, the Maronites in northern Israel number in the thousands. In 1920, they played a central role in the creation of Greater Lebanon under the French Mandate, creating a regional refuge for Christians in the Middle East. And to this day, Maronite Christians still hold the presidential office as part of a national pact within Lebanon's sectarian society. But with Israel and Lebanon...
like when they say, oh, it's sectarian society, right? Well, the French made it be sectarian, right? Like, that's kind of the point of it all, right? Like, it made it sectarian so that then the Maronites, whom it privileged, could have that power, right? That's the reason why when they took the census and they decided to use that census as the basis for power distribution, it was the one which did so on the basis of it's always the French, as we know from last night, which, by the way, at 3, or rather at 6 p.m. Eastern time, we are going to, the stream isn't going to be like super, super long because we are going to be hosting community night in the Discord server where we're going to be watching the movie La Chinoise, which is, and I actually, you know what, I will play, a trailer for it, but it's about like a Maoist communist group, right, cadre that kind of is in Paris, and it's based off of the Fyodor Dostoevsky's the Demons. Definitely worth. I need to read the message by Nahishi Coates. Oh yeah, I've heard that. Hello, Boy Meets Mini. Hello, yes. Party people indeed.
On being next door enemies. Maronites like Savine have had to come up with creative solutions to go on pilgrimage to Lebanon from Israel.
We get the Palestinian passport just in Jordan, so we move the border with the Israeli passport, and then we take the Palestinian one, leave the Israeli passport in Jordan in the church, and we went to Lebanon. And when we come back, also we give them back the Palestinian passport. We cannot have it, and take the Israeli passport and move the border back to Israel.
See, like, it's funny. Like when they you're in general VC. Oh, okay. Let me move you over here. Okay. Hello. Oh. Why did you go back to general? I put you in the Salon de school for a reason.
No worries, no worries. Good to see you. Good to see you.
Good to see.
On. There we go.
Yeah. Just let me set it up so that way it makes sure to show you on screen. So there we go. There we go. Okay, so
I have both your chats up, so YouTube and Twitch. So in case I need to respond to anyone or answer questions, got everybody covered.
Yeah. No. Oh yeah. No. We're gonna have the video now. I just wanted to make sure that I had it all set up correctly first.
Hey, I see myself now on the feed.
Yes. So, if you want to just quickly introduce yourself and your channel, just so we can make sure that people would like to join in.
Sure, and you can hear me loud and clear, right? Hopefully everything's set up, and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm Boy Meets Mini. He Thang. I go by He Thang. It's fine. I am originally from South Asia, specifically northern India. So I speak Hindustani, Hindi, some Urdu. Oh, I wish I could read Urdu, the Arabic script. That's my main background. My family has been in Christian ministry for a long time. I'm the grandson of a bishop, a Methodist bishop. So my family comes from more of a Protestant background. I know in South Asia there's many denominations of Christianity, ranging from the colonial era ones like Catholic and Protestant, and then there's Marthoma and other sort of older sects of Christianity, particularly in the South. So, but I come from a Protestant background, and speak up a little bit. But yeah, I am come from there. I live in the U.S. Been here since I was a kid. But I've gone back to India many times, so I'm pretty close to the Christian communities over there. And this topic interested me because I've always studied sort of the early Christianity, and I've wanted to get more into it. And it's shifted my perspective significantly from the traditional narratives that you learn in Protestant. Oh, am I muted? I shouldn't be.
Yeah, neither of us should be muted, but
All right, hello. I'll do a shorter. I'll reintroduce myself shortly.
okay, no. It was just some temporary thing, I think.
Weird, huh? Okay, now I'm good. Thanks, PB. Okay, good. Yeah, so just real quick, Boy Meets Mini, South Asian Christian, mainly from a Protestant background, from North India originally, I'm sort of tied into multiple Christian communities, whether it's the one back home in Uttar Pradesh or the one here in the U.S. I one of my main concerns one of my main concerns is the rise of sort of ethno nationalism in Christianity of various forms, depending where you go. There's a lot of sectarianism going on, and a lot of adoption of things that I feel, well, at least in my heart and soul, do not belong in Christianity. For example, gender binary doesn't belong. Controversial, I know. Gender binary doesn't really belong. Um, the idea that we're the only true religion, I mean, what does that even mean, right? So, kind of deconstructing that, and um, 10 years ago, if you met me, I was a very, very right wing, very fascist Christian. I bought into all the American Christian nationalism. I bought into all the brain rot from Protestants in India. So as well, they adopt a lot of that stuff. So, but I've significantly healed from that, and so being some and I think Shakespeare. One thing that impressed me about what you do is you also come from like this diaspora where you're like a minority within your own faith. You know what I mean? And so that's where I think that's how we sort of connected. And yeah. So is it cutting in and out? Sorry, I don't know if Twitch is being twitchy or what's going on. Um, yeah, yeah. Mitra Varna, try refreshing. I don't know if Twitch is being twitchy right now. But yes, so I have significantly progressed as a Christian. Had a militant atheist period. Um, I had a militant atheist period for a while, and then a few years ago sort of came back to my faith, and but in a different way, in a way that's more sort of disconnected from the institution, that's more, you know, sort of understanding the scripture as it is, not as like a literalist interpretation, but like understanding, in terms of like historical context, um, in terms of liberation theology and things like that. That is definitely closer to the original meaning. So yeah, Twitch on mute. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
That's okay. Yeah, it defaults to mute when you load a stream. So when you refresh. But anyways, yeah, I hope that's sort of my background to this, and this topic again interested me because, and I think I said this when it cut out. But I think I said this when it cut out, but this topic interests me because I have been looking into early Christianity a lot more, sort of how, how much more sort of community oriented and anarchist the church was originally, and how like different communities, whether it was Jewish communities or early, like for example, the Maronite communities, how they came about and sort of how they've evolved over time. But yeah, I'm very interfaith now as a Christian, and I do feel that it is a much better, brighter path than the one I was on. So yeah, but yes, and so yeah, that's enough for my introduction. But hopefully that gives people sort of a context sort of gives people enough context. And I'm looking forward to learn a lot today. By the way, this is the topic I've wanted to get into. I've done some reading, some. I watched I believe it was the Frontline series. Frontline on PBS did a series on like early Middle East Christianity, and it's very good because they don't do it from a sort of like Protestant or Zionist perspective. They are much more academic about it. So they do mention that Jesus and many people at his time and were Palestinian. So they mentioned that it was Palestine back then. So they're actually, I felt like it was a fairly accurate telling of the history. So yeah.
Yes.
Yes, Alex. Twitch doesn't want us to know. Yes, Twitch wants us to adopt the Protestant work ethic. Yeah. Anyways.
Hey, that's actually not that far off. No. Yeah. So one of the things that I kind of like felt that was really important to start with is the fact that that when Christianity sort of begins to, and again, I'm sure that you are more than able to correct me when I begin to be incorrect, for sure. But one of the things I found very fascinating is this kind of early. Oh, now I'm blessed. Uh, Interesting word choice, but
Good old OBS.
yeah. Different. Like first, oh, we have trouble hearing now. It's like, oh, now you're too loud. Okay. Hello, Nabil. Welcome in. Welcome in. Hopefully that's better.
Let me test it. Nabil, salam bhaiya. Good to see you. Good to see you.
Also, Mauritius finally got back from the British, the Diego Garcia Island and stuff. Chagos.
Okay, so I don't want to burst your bubble on that one. So it's Nabil covered this last night, by the way.
Oh, good.
Shout out to him. So because he is Mauritian, already, his family comes from Mauritius originally. So the Chagos Islands, the British giving to Mauritius is kind of a debacle, because the Chagosian people, if I'm saying that correctly, indigenous to those islands, right? And Mauritius, first of all, the Chagos Islands were never originally part of Mauritius. Mauritius was kind of, if I understand, oh, I'm muted again? The heck? Am I just cutting in and out?
Oh,
okay,
maybe
could be my noise gate. One sec. All right, that should be better. Hopefully I'm not cutting out. Yeah, there we go. I turned down the noise gate.
Yeah, it says
hopefully that's better.
Yeah, they're saying you're fading in and out, but I don't know why that would be.
Yeah. Is it better now? Hopefully.
It cut out.
I don't know if I'm cutting. Weird. Okay. Well, just let me know. Just let me know, chat. I think they're on top of it. But I was gonna say about the. Okay. Fine. Now it's TCAT. Okay. So Mauritius and the Chagos Islands are an interesting case, because what you have to recognize is the Chagos Islands were originally home to the Chagosian people. The people of those islands were indigenous, right? So, and the other angle of this that people aren't reading into is that there's still, yes, Nabil, there's still an American military base, and basically the only way that the UK was going to give up the Chagos Islands was to let the U.S. have military control of the base there. So basically, it's still colonized. And so one of the concerns, here I'll talk into the mic more. One of the concerns about this is that the U.S. is going to use this as an opportunity. There we go. The U.S. is going to use this as an opportunity to have military control of the Indian Ocean. This could potentially start wars. This could potentially fuel ongoing conflicts in Africa and places like that, because Mauritius is actually a member of the African Union as well. So I'm wondering, like, is it going to potentially fuel conflicts in, like, the Congo, right, in Rwanda and Burundi? That's the current sort of the three countries right now that are in sort of a conflict, and unfortunately are also enacting genocide to various groups of people. So that's the concern. So this isn't all like rainbows, and this isn't all like, blue skies and rainbows here. This is actually very problematic. What has happened to the Chagos Islands? So.
Right.
Still happening? Is it still
going on? Is it good now? I've been trying to, because I made sure to lower the gain on myself, since earlier it said it's good now. Okay, good. Okay.
I think, yeah, I'm gonna make sure I'll stay close to the mic, even though it's like it's in my face. I think in OBS I use a compressor, whereas Discord doesn't have one, so what do you do? Anyways,
Okay, we're good now. We're good now.
So hopefully that explains. And yeah, Nabil I think sums it up. It's still sort of colonialism. It's colonialism masked in that, oh, the British lost in territory, but actually they still maintain hegemony, right? They haven't lost the hegemony yet.
Yeah, they're saying you're louder when you face the mic, so.
Okay, I'll keep looking this way. How about that? It's probably because the way, yeah, because I do I have to move my mic. So on my stream sometimes I'll do sim racing. So for that I have to raise my desk a bunch for the wheel alignment and stuff. So then I have to change my mic position to do that. So that's probably why. But apologies, I should be better
Okay.
now.
Um,
That should be more direct.
and then, I'm Shakespeare. I'm a cultural historian. My emphasis in my research is my areas of expertise are Jewish history and Latin American history, but you know, uh, Jewish history also involves discussing the history of Christianity, the history of Islam, and then also the history of the Middle East at at different junctures. So very much. But Boy Meets Mini's volume seems to be fluctuating randomly. I don't know why that would be, because for me it seems fine. Like it comes across as completely fine. So
Yeah, I'll keep it close. Don't worry.
okay.
This should be ideal.
So one of the things that I thought we could get into first, right, would be looking at sort of. I mean, I don't know if you want to start a Pentecost or if we should. Like I wasn't sure where to start.
Probably. I don't know what you were thinking about. I don't know what you were thinking, but what if we start with the current events, right? Because
Okay.
I know you started with that video about how I think what was it, the Maronite communities in Israel or also in Lebanon who kind of side with the IDF. I guess we could start from that context and then work backwards. It might make more sense for people.
Yeah, sure. So,
Mm.
in effect, so the Maronite community, right, is is one of those communities that goes back quite a while. But when it comes to the civil war of Lebanon, which lasted from 1975 to 2000, which is a long time. That is a very long civil war. Um, uh, we must also remember that from 1985 to 2000, Israel occupied Lebanon. So, for a good tough period of time. During that particular time period when the IDF first began its incursion into Lebanon, it found a collaborator in the Qataib party, otherwise known as the Phalangists. And the Phalangists were started were inspired by the Falange in Spain, which is a Catholic nationalist, fascist or organization, where they
Nice.
wanted to institute like Catholic social teaching and other such things as sort of like but the big thing about the Maronites is that in 1830, going on from there, there is a point where the French essentially decide to intervene because of there were these massacres that and unfortunately caused issues with. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going way into the past. I'm trying to like explain all the so recently, starting from 82 until now. You have the Maronites who, again, in the party goes under the name Qataib, but their other name is the Phalangists, and they are known for, in 1982, with the IDF's help, with not only the IDF holding, making sure nobody could go in and out of the Sabra and Shatila refugee camps, but also which is where Palestinians were, right? These are places where Palestinians lived. The Maronites felt that the Palestinians who had been forced to become refugees, doubly refugees in a way, after being kicked out of Jordan during Black September, that they essentially somehow changed the demographic balance in Lebanon and would now give more power to the Muslims because the Maronites held power by a slim majority of 51%. Of course, this isn't true because the Palestinians, being refugees, cannot vote. Uh, they cannot,
So it's a limited representation, and it's not a real voice of the people because I mean Palestinian refugees are essentially residents of Lebanon. I mean they have been for many years. It's not like they're just like temporarily there. It's almost like they're permanently just residing there. They should be citizens at this point.
right,
Unbelievable.
and that was one of the and see that was one of the things that the Qatar party, the Phalanges, don't want, right? And so that was why they historically are known for siding with the IDF, because effectively there was going to be a kind of like essentially the best way I could put it is France's Israel, right? In a weird way, but for
It's a good analogy,
yeah,
actually.
but for Christians, right? It was supposed to be a Christian majority state, right? Carved out of Greater Syria, because Lebanon and Syria have never historically been been seen as separate. That's a very recent sort of line drawn that by Europeans, right? They ran in the
Yeah,
last.
and
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
sorry. Yeah, I was gonna not to dig back in the history, but I guess just to hint at it. The name Maronite comes from Saint Maron, I think, if that's how you say his name.
Mhm.
But Saint Maron was Assyrian, I think, if I remember correctly, an Assyrian Christian,
Yes.
who evangelized the peoples who lived in and around Mount Lebanon, and those people were the first Maronites, if I remember correctly.
Yes. And so, no, yes, you're completely right. And one of the things too, well, and we'll get to that, is that when that sect of Christianity begins, it begins, like when you have the institutionalized church, right? Particularly the one at Rome, you do have the issue of them being considered. Well, even before that, once you have the conciliar churches and everything, you have it being considered a heretical sect. But again, we will get to that in a second. But Daymal in chat says the Phalangist ran in the last elections here in Spain and have always done so. They run in the elections in Lebanon. Still, they are a political party. They also have an armed wing, right? Which is weird. Why, when people who are Maronite try to cast Hezbollah as being all an armed wing, when their party also has an armed wing? Yeah.
Literally know you.
Yeah, it's like you can't do it, you can't do it to us. But anyway, yeah, and their symbol is actually a red. It's like a cross, but it has like white in the middle, and then it's like it kind of actually looks like a reverse. Oh, this is gonna sound horrible, but like a reverse English cross, right? Because you know how like
Oh, yeah,
instead of it being like red in the middle and white around, it's white in the middle and red around, and it's really, yeah. Anyway, but the point being that like that's one of their symbols, as is this really weird, like it's like they decided to go for a geometric shaped pine tree. And doesn't it also kind of look like a sword? Yeah, at the very bottom it kind of has like this like knife's edge, which I don't know. I don't know how Jesus would feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, considering his emphasis on nonviolence, on you know, and yeah, considering his emphasis on nonviolence, and as well as the you know, I wonder if that sword is like a reference back to the Crusaders, because if I remember, I know that there were Crusader, like, well, the Crusaders laid siege to many places in the Levant, and in Anatolia, or back then, Turkey, because they were doing genocides of it was a genocide carried out by the Catholic powers of Europe,
Mm-hmm.
basically. But I mean, also, let's not forget the Ottomans also did their fair share of genocide too. It's not
Yeah.
like they weren't the good guys either. But you know what I mean? Like from what I read in some of the history, the Maronites were supportive, or were they oppressed by the Crusaders? I'm starting to forget
So
which side they were on. But I
so
wonder if the sword is a throwback to the Crusaders.
it would be interesting if it were, because I mean I don't know off the top of my head, but it would be interesting if it were, because of the fact that it wouldn't surprise me if it were, because of the fact that like a lot of the places where they are still, I mean, where they have historically been the majority and still are, you still have like a lot of those like ancient, or not ancient, but in this case, like crusader castles still existing. But there's actually one, and it's actually quite sad. And I know I've mentioned on stream even yesterday, like I've been to Syria before, and I've been really really close to the tri-point border, because I mean you can't get that close to the Israeli side. I'll put it like that. It's dangerous. The Israelis are dangerous.
There's And how long? It's got a pretty wide DMZ there too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Between what they call the Golan Heights, um, and like the new, I guess, there's that DMZ between the two, right?
Right. And there are like villages and towns that like kind of technically extend into there because they're completely civilian, right? And they don't have to worry
Mm.
about that. So you can technically go into it. Well, on one side only on the Syrian side. The Israeli side, you can't, for reasons. but
We know why.
yeah,
We know why.
but that DMZ does get narrower as you get closer to the Sea of Galilee, or uh, just because it just, that's just the natural, like the way how the land moves. But when you go up to where it begins to sort of go back down again, it's right by Mount Hermon, which is where, if you were to go into what is occupied by Israel, that's where they have their ski resorts, with their Swiss, what are they called? Chalet, Swiss looking chalets, and it's kind of like very strange. Like, anyway,
That is really strange. I mean, I live in California, and even here well, throughout California, you go to the ski resorts, and they all look like Swiss chalets.
yeah,
To a
exactly.
degree. It's like this was Mexico. What?
Yeah, I'm sure that we could build stuff that like looks like, I don't know, it would belong here, not like in Geneva or something. But still, but I went right up to that side because I wanted to sort of see. Well, they said if you get close enough, you can actually see the trenches from '67, and it's true. I've seen them. Like I've walked in them. Okay, I kind of haven't mentioned this before. I have technically walked in those trenches, but I had to be
Wow.
had to be.
There. You didn't worry about mine. I guess it's demined, hopefully. You
So
didn't worry about landmines.
so
My
the
goodness.
Right, yes, I didn't have to worry about landmines because the only place where they like the place where they could assure that it was completely demined, or at least as so far as I know, was they said, well, this one here is kind of like off in the distance. It's kind of like it's kind of forgotten. It's way over here. We've looked over it, and it's not in that DMZ zone. It's sort of like off to the side. And they're like, so you can like look at it if you want to, and and it's just this very strange feeling where you're just like going there. But the main reason why is just because it's on the way to where I was trying to get to. But they're like, don't get too close because then there are mines, and you don't want to and then and it's very strange too because the signs are only in Hebrew and English from the Israelis. It's very fascinating that they specifically choose not to put them in Arabic. I'm just gonna put that out there. But anyway,
Yeah. In Yeah, and that I know you talked about like Hebrew or modern Hebrew, the imposition of modern Hebrew on Israeli society and just on I guess the countries around it, right? We have a similar problem in India with Hindi imposition. So Hindi is mainly spoken up north, in places like Delhi, Uttar Pradesh, and even like I could maybe for another time go into the history of the Hindi language. Hindi is a modern version, kind of like modern Hebrew or modern Mandarin. Modern Hindi is a sort of a Sanskritization of all the North Indian languages that existed from before. You know, you're talking about like Urdu, which has a lot of Turkic influence because of Mughal invasion and conquest. But then you had, you know, the older languages of the north, like Awadhi, Braj, you know, Khariboli. There's so many. Bhojpuri was a major influence in that. Uh, so yeah, Hindi in and of itself is a modern invention. And then Hindustani, which is the other language I mentioned, that's spoken in mostly in Uttar Pradesh. It's sort of a common parlance, basically. It's like daily use. Um, you could kind of, I guess, almost call it kind of like a Yiddish of sorts because it derives from several languages and is sort of, you know, it's like commonly spoken throughout the region,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like how Yiddish came from, I guess, what, German and Polish, and
M-
maybe some of the Eastern European languages, or like derive from it.
yeah, it derived from High Middle German, and then it branched off, and then each like wherever the population sort of moved around in Eastern and Central Europe, they kind of added more and more. It's the reason why, like for example, I once told this to Lucy, our mutual friend. Um,
Oh yeah, we
uh,
lo- we love Lucy around here.
yeah, Lucy's very, very intelligent, and very, especially when it comes to the Warsaw Ghetto and stuff with Polish Jewry, um, is like Russian Yiddish is like the best description I ever was given of it was the following: experimental. because because of the fact that like the it's very strange because you also had the Russification process, right, which is where they wanted everybody to speak Russian, but then you still had a large Yiddish speaking population, and so what you had are like these weird like verb endings that don't make sense, pluralizations that don't like plural suffixes that don't make sense, because usually if something is plural in Yiddish, you say lach, like children is kinderlach, right? And you can hear that like kinder, right? Like you can hear the German in that, right? Um, uh, what alphabet was it written? It was written using a modified Hebrew alphabet. But there were some that like would write, but then they would add in other things that were like essentially like Russian sounds into the language, and so when you read it, you're like, I have no idea what this says. Like literally
But
no.
did they like put accents, like additional accents on the letters, on the characters to like at least get the phonetics? I don't know, how would they do
Yeah, because for example, like Russian doesn't have the H sound, but Hebrew does. In fact, it has several H sounds, right? So when they had to do that, then they would use one letter, but then when it's the ch sound, right? They're like, oh well, we'll use this letter when it's used in this way, but this letter when it's used in this way, and so it's just a mess. It's just an absolute mess. And then when you do have them doing the opposite, where they start transliterating Yiddish into with using Russian, it just becomes even more like incomprehensible. Yeah, Hebrew has all of the H sounds. And another thing too is, remember, Hebrew is a biblical Hebrew, but especially modern Hebrew, like perhaps more specifically, but biblical Hebrew as well. It's a hyper-gendered language. What I mean by that is that everything is gendered, even down to there are two ways to count: a masculine counting system and a feminine counting system, right? Like if I wanted to say I want 2 cups of water, right, or we want 2 cups of water, that change between I and we would involve one gender numeral change. The cups would be one gender numeral change, and then water would itself be like, oh, if we wanted like, or if we wanted other beverages, right? That would also, and they would all have to conjugate it at once in the sentence. So it's so anyway. So what were we talking about again? Oh yes, the Maronites.
Sorry, I didn't want to don't divert too much, but yeah, you were talking about like the DMZ with Syria, and you had gone there, and you notice all the signs in Hebrew and English only,
Right.
which is like, it sort of signals their the expansionist mindset of the of Israel as a country,
Right.
and violent expansionism.
Yes, they are, Estelle. Yeah. Like Mashlomcha, or Shmolech. Like, and the worst thing is they're written exactly the same, because Hebrew, like modern Hebrew, has no vowels. No, like, they are no vowels nowhere in it. So you cannot tell whether it's Mashlomach or Mashlomcha unless you know the rest of the context. But yes, then the vowels are also gendered too. And then people complain about Spanish. Oh yeah, Spanish to me, like, honestly, I'm like, it's so easily like can be neutral. Well, saying it like that sounds strange, but you know what I mean. It can so easily become like can easily become like non-binary. You can very easily construct that into Spanish or into French. In Hebrew, it's like nigh impossible. But so as I was there, right? So again, like I said, like the division between Syria and Lebanon is a very artificial one, right? One created by the French. And as all pretty much are all the borders in the global South, but
Yep. Yeah, it's like Lord Mountbatten drew all of them, didn't he?
yeah, pretty much. I mean,
He wasn't the only one, but there were a lot of Lord Mountbattens drawing borders in the global South.
yeah. And so in this case, like Damascus feels very strange, because like just as the foothills of the anti-Lebanon mountains start getting like a little bit high enough to start being like real, then there's like a random border, and that's the border between Syria and Lebanon. In fact, that's where the Israelis bombed just the other day. But where I was, where it's more like me looking up at Lebanon or me looking up at the Golan Heights, means that I could see the remains of a Crusader castle there, and that's what I was trying to get at, right? That like there was this history of like I mean, in Damascus, there you have the Patriarchate of Antioch there, and I've been to that patriarchal cathedral, right, to go see. And it's interesting too, because I don't know if you've ever encountered this, and maybe you have, where people try to argue that that Christians cannot use the word Allah to refer to the Christian God. Have you ever heard that?
Do.
No, exactly, yeah.
So in South Asia, and well, particularly North India, of course, when you go to South India, you have the Dravidian languages, which are totally different family. So they have different words for God. But where I'm from, in Uttar Pradesh, a lot of Christians will use the Urdu word for, because I know there's like multiple words for God in like Arabic and Farsi and in Pashtun, like all those, Middle Eastern and sort of Central Asian languages. But the main word that Christians will use in India for God is Khuda. Khuda it sort of comes from Farsi and from Arabic. Well, Arabic is more, of course, it's Allah, but it's also Rabba. Rabba is also a word in Arabic for God, or for like for God, basically. It's a more of like a I guess it's like an alternate term, but I know. But I've heard Pakistani Christians use the word Allah because that's what they know. Like a lot of them will say the word Allah. I know some Persian Jewish people. In fact, my last therapist that I used to go to, she's Persian Jewish. She is originally from the part of Iran that's near Azerbaijan. I think, what's the place called? Tabriz?
Yeah,
Tabriz.
Tabriz.
I think Tabriz. Yeah, however you say it. But yeah, all the Jewish people say mashallah. They all say it because it's in their language. That's how they say praise God, or glory be to God. That's literally, they say mashallah. So it doesn't offend me. Like, I know a lot of like Western Christians will get offended, like if they hear a say an Arab Christian or a Pakistani Christian say mashallah, inshallah, all that stuff. But it's like, to me, I'm like, that literally means God. And one thing that's also kind of interesting, because I feel like um, in Lebanon especially, there's a lot of interfaith coexistence, and there's obviously tensions with that as well. But we have a similar thing in India, where because it's such a religiously and culturally diverse country, um, like the where I'm from in Uttar Pradesh, Christians will often live alongside people of all other faiths because we're like a tiny minority of that state. We're like UP doesn't even have more than 1% Christians, but it's
Mm-hmm.
growing pretty quickly. It like the churches are growing and stuff like that. So, but it's still only about 1%. So we're like a small minority within a state that's mostly Hindu and then has a large number. It's about like 20% Muslim
Mm-hmm.
state. So Christians will often live alongside Muslims and non-Brahmin Hindus. So Hinduism is interesting because Brahmin Hindus, they only want to be amongst themselves. Because they're the upper castes, right? And of course there are other high castes that only want to live amongst themselves and want to segregate others out. But Hindus generally who are not of those upper castes will live side by side with Muslims and Christians and Sikhs. Nobody has a problem, Buddhists. They don't really have a problem with it. So I'm very used to interfaith coexistence, whereas many Western Christians, especially you're seeing with a lot of the rhetoric now, are saying that when Muslims come over or when non-Western, even they'll even say stuff about people like me. They'll say things like, "Oh, non-Western Christians are coming to our country. Maybe they don't understand our culture and our norms, even though they're Christian." Like they'll still have this racism against. They'll still have this racism against fellow Christians who happen to be from the global south. So my and so yeah, like it doesn't bother me one bit that a lot of Christians and even Jews say mashallah and address God as Allah. In fact, I think that's I think that's actually a good thing because it preserves languages, one, and two, I feel like it fosters more interfaith discourse, coexistence, and friendship. So why not?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, like, again, like when I was in Damascus or in Damascus, I literally, like, with the exception of the fact that some of the people that I knew that happened to have been Antiochian Orthodox Christians sometimes would wear like a crucifix. I There's no difference. I mean, like literally, like they have same this like similar, and they're often interrelated too. It's like because it all goes back a long time. And so when it comes to like the Maronites in particular, this is where the fact that Palestinians were brought, were as it were. So when 1948 happens, Lebanon says doesn't really invade. It doesn't. I mean, no country really invades actually. Syria and Iraq are the only countries that actually prepare in any real way to form part of the ALA, the Arab Liberation Army, that is supposed to defend the Palestinians in 48. But they don't even arrive until like April of 48. So well after the Nakba begins, which is December of 47. And so in this context, there are some people, particularly from the Galilee, because that's the region right abutting the southern part of Lebanon, that go up into what is Beirut and stuff, and they are sort of forced into these refugee camps, particularly Sabra and Shatila. And when Black September happens, the Jordanian army kicks out the PLO, and they found their new base in Beirut. And because of this, right, then this puts a specific target on the city of Beirut. And because the French made it so that the Maronites, like, they made a sectarian constitution which said, yes, we're going to have elections, but in order to be the president of Lebanon, you have to be a Maronite Christian. In order to be the prime minister, you have to be a Sunni Muslim. In order to be the speaker of parliament, you have to be Shia Muslim, right? So everything was already done, and they based it on a census taken before, I believe it was in 1946. No, pardon me. It was a census taken before 1946, where Maronites had a 51% majority. So what ends up happening later on, once the Civil War begins, is that it comes at this view that the power of the Maronites is being lost, right? Because the Muslim citizens of Lebanon feel that they should have elections that represent the people as such, right? They want to have a completely representative democracy that isn't already apportioned to specific people, right? They want to have a regular constitution, non-sectarian. But that would come at the loss of the ruling class that has had, right, whether under French, colonial rule, and for the brief period of, independence up until that point, and also had this privileged position when the Ottoman Empire granted the French, who essentially imposed themselves on this, they imposed on the Ottomans this, that they wanted to create a protectorate of the Maronite Catholics, in the 19th century under Napoleon III. So they've had this privileged existence for well over a century, and then you have a civil war breakout because you essentially have people that say we should be able to vote for whomever we want, and we shouldn't have to always have the most powerful person in charge always be a Maronite Christian. So what they begin to blame is the fact that the Palestinians were moved into Lebanon. And because most of them, and see, here's the thing, right? Here's where you see a lot of this weird, like, strange, sorry about that, this, like, strange Islamophobic type of thinking that you often get, where it's black and white thinking, is like not even all of the people who all of the Palestinians who find refuge in Lebanon are Muslim. Why? And a lot of people chose Lebanon, when they were trying to, or rather, I should say, not chose, but a lot of them who did go into Lebanon came from the cities that are still to this day majority Palestinian Christian, like Nazareth.
Right, like Bethlehem, right?
Yeah.
Bethlehem.
Or Bethlehem. Yeah, exactly. And
Hebron also is too, right?
Yeah,
I think.
it's the largest city. Hello, Zedzir, welcome in. And yeah, but the largest being Nazareth, which is like right up on that border. It's like almost right there. And then like cities around it, like Bethlehem in the Galilee, which some scholars think was the Bethlehem described in the Gospels, but I don't know. Anyway, we're not gonna go that far back. But anyway, no. But no,
but like you were saying, I guess a lot of the because most Palestinian Christians, I guess, like there's multiple denominations, right? There's the Greek Orthodox. There's probably the other forms of Orthodoxy that they practice, and there's probably, from what I've read, there's also Catholic and even some Baptist Palestinian Christians. So it's a diaspora in a way, right? There's so many. It's its own diaspora of like Palestinian Christianity, and
right.
I keep reminding people because on sometimes on my stream when I do, and I call it this, and it's kind of a meme, but I go with it. It's called critical faith theory, where I will cover a topic. And I'll often, I need to work on some edits actually of one that I did recently, but I'll take a topic and cover it from a sort of lefty progressive Christian perspective, but also an interfaith perspective. And one of the things that came up in a stream one time was sort of about Palestine, and it was about like, and I've also had to talk to fellow South Asian Christians about this, because some of them are really, really sold on the Israel idea, They're very pro-Israel, and I have to keep reminding them that, hey, where did Jesus come from? Where were Joseph and Mary from? Where was the whole family lineage from? They were Palestinian, and they can't stomach that fact because it's like, no, they're Israelites, and I'm like, the whole mention of, and I know this is a little off topic, but like the whole mention of the word, the whole like, I think I read somewhere that apparently like the use of the term Israelite came later. It came like 1,000 years BC, I think. Like it, like I think from at least from the Frontline documentary, the Frontline series that I watched, they were saying that the word Israelite didn't really come about until like 1,000 or 1,200 BC, and then before that, the people who who we read about, the Israelite people who are described in Exodus and Genesis, and in the Torah, basically, the people in that time basically regarded themselves as Canaanites. But again, I could be wrong. I could be inaccurate about that. But it seems like the term Israelite came after. It was a revision of the history.
Right, like
I don't know that for sure. I would trust you on that part.
right. So no, I'm so glad that you brought this up because this will definitely help dispel a lot of the Zionist aspect later on. Is that yes, it is the way how it is understood is that when you have so it's usually described in the following, right? There is Matan Torah, which is the giving of the Torah, which is both the written and the oral, right, which later got written down anyway, but what is the Talmud, right, this oral tradition, right, which is not Jewish law. It also, do not read it as a novel, do not read it as it's literally rabbis discussing things. Even Jesus discusses rabbis who are in the Talmud. So he obviously, the historical Jesus must have known that tradition anyway. The point being that prior to Matan Torah, which is the giving of the Torah to Moses at Har Sinai, or Mount Sinai, is that before that they were called Bnei Israel, right, the children of Israel. But that meant literally the sons of Jacob, because they were still alive, right? But but we have the like, in fact it even says in the Torah, right, that that generation had to pass away so that then like everybody who's going into the land of Canaan, and in fact, again, like I said, like in the Torah it always refers to it as Aretz Canaan. Like it always refers to it as the land of Canaan. And Shlomo's go ahead.
So the name of the newspaper, I guess it's like that liberal newspaper in Israel, Aretz literally means the land or the country, I guess you could, is that how it translates?
Yeah, it literally means the land.
Wow.
And it also means like the earth, in the sense of like in the beginning God created heaven and the earth. Hashamayim ve'etz haaretz. That's also where it's also there. Like it's literally in that too, because like the word for planet, well, technically the word for world and universe is technically the same, and it's olam, but that's that's a whole different discussion. But yes, haaretz literally means the land. But the point being that Shlomo Sand also contends that like because we know of history, because we know archaeologically, right, that there never was a united kingdom of Israel, right? That this idea that there was such a kingdom that extended this far and however far, right? Instead, there was a northern kingdom of Israel that at one point, fell apart and, didn't exist after a certain point. He contends in his book, The Invention of the Land of Israel, that part of that, and that sort of nationalist revisionist history that is part in the 19th century especially, is actually them trying to forcefully impose that idea of the mythological United Kingdom, so that then they can claim more land than they otherwise would, because in the name for Jewish, if for Jew in Hebrew, Yehudi, it literally means a Judean, So it already says like not from the kingdom of Israel, it's from the kingdom of Judah, right? So it's like literally there. It should, but Shlomo Sen goes even further to say that anytime it refers to Eretz Israel, which is the land of Israel, in the Tanakh, it only does so in reference to that northern kingdom, and nothing else. And that's what I found to be very fascinating.
Yeah, I found the book on archive.org. I'm pretty sure, because I have a library card, I'm pretty sure I'll be able to borrow an electronic copy, because I feel like this is something that especially because I try to face the mic more. I want to cover it. I want to cover it for South Asian Christians, because I think October in Twitch chat said, yeah, this is something that they see with Southeast Asia with Christians and with Catholics. Yeah, there's a very the narrative of an Israeli nation state is pushed very, very hard in churches, because again, a lot of the churches we have, like, unlike I guess the Maronite churches have been around much, much longer. I mean, those have been around for almost a millennium. But the churches in South Asia have been around not as long, with the exception of, you could say, the Maratama churches in. Are we having an issue or?
Yeah, I just wanted to put the volume
up
out
a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. How am I coming through now? Should be good. I'm making sure to stay close to this mic, because
Nabil says it's something with your mic.
With my mic? Okay, let me.
Yeah.
Here's what I'll do.
Yeah, I'm using OBS.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just gonna really turn down the noise gate, so maybe a little bit easier now, a little better, not cutting out as much. So.
Okay, I also raised the gain on here on OBS for White Meets Mini. So let's see. Okay, so.
All right, is this much better? Hopefully. Think so. we should be better.
But is it good now for Boy Meets Mini?
Yep, testing 1 2. We good?
Yeah, are we good? There's a volume mixer. Yeah, I see that. But
Nabil, sing Chaya 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 Chaya.
Oh my gosh. So so
Bollywood songs.
So now both of ours should be about equal. They're literally up to the very highest setting possible. So okay.
Sorry. Nabil asked me to sing a little Bollywood there. Anyways.
Oh my gosh.
You've probably heard that song. It's a popular one.
Yeah.
But sorry, I was saying about how, like, in churches and to respond to October, you're half Vietnamese and your biological mother converted to Catholicism maybe 10 years after she came to the U.S. Yeah, so there's interesting dynamics that happen where either in the home country, like say Vietnam or India or wherever, Christians will adopt a lot of the westernized narratives about Israel, and about the Middle East, and also that Islamophobia gets ingrained in them. And it's weird because in especially North India, there are millions of Muslims. I think actually, overall as a country, India is like number 3 in the world in terms of number of Muslims. It's third. It's right after Indonesia and Pakistan for a number of Muslims. So there are a lot of Muslims, in India who are not even in the Middle East. Millions of them. And so I just find it really disconcerting when, like, what you'll see over there is like North Indian Christians will say, oh, they don't have any problem with Muslims. A lot of their friends, coworkers, even family are Muslim. Relatives or friends of relatives. They'll often go to each other's weddings, et cetera, right? But then they say all the stuff about Israel that the U.S. and Western missionaries taught them, and I just that paradox just never sat right with me. And so, that is one thing that like really just rubs me the wrong way. So I've been trying to help and reach out back to the Christian communities I come from, and let them know that the narratives you've been taught about Israel are manufactured, and you need to actually look back in the theology and the history. And even some pastors have disagreed with me. I'm like, dog, you went to seminary, you should know this. But I don't know what the seminaries are teaching now. But anyways,
Right. And like what you say is actually a really a good point as well, because also it's not just that, but then it's unlimited power. Indeed. Is the fact that you have you also have it where then you have the justifications of the Zionist project, right? Also embedded with all of those things. So it's not even just because there's also this like Islamophobia that also comes with the acceptance of those things, right? That it's like, oh well, Christian, it's the whole idea of like Judeo-Christian, right, against something else, right? That's typically how it ends up being, right? Or at least how it ends up being formulated, I should say. And so what I mean to say is that like that is one of the ways in which you have a big difference as well, when we're sort of discussing how in Jewish thought, right? Like it's after the giving of the Torah that the Jewish people begin to, as it were, exist, right? Like after that, then they are the Jewish people, right? But it's kind of a weird thing because it's like, well, they haven't reached Judea, so to speak, right? But that's kind of where they're headed, I suppose, right? They're kind of named by where their destination is going to be, one might say. But the point, but yet every reference in the Torah is to Haaretz Canaan, right? The land of Canaan. And so what you have is that prior to this, you would the way in which that they would have described themselves would have been Ivrim, right? Because you have Avraham HaIvri, right? Which is Abraham from the other side. That's what Ivri or Ivrit means, right? Or because Abraham came from Ur of the Chaldees, right? Which is often identified as being the city state of Ur, sort of in the Basra area now in southern Iraq, right? And so his name Avraham HaIvri speaks to the fact that he also came from, as it were, the other side, like it literally means like the other side of a river, like on the other side, the other bank of a river.
I guess the other side of the Euphrates in this case.
Yes, exactly. And so up until that point, one way to regard them is the Hebrews, right? Ha'ivrim. Then you have the period with Jacob, where you have his sons, right? Because his name is changed, right? And so he is Israel. And so when he gives, not when he gives birth. I mean, I don't know that would be a very progressive reading of the Torah, I guess.
Yeah.
But rather when he engenders his 12 children, right? That's when you get the Bnei Israel, and that is the children. Although Bnei really means sons, but still it means children as well, of Israel, right? And that's only in reference to him, not in reference to any piece of land anywhere. this is where people start to make the equivocation, because yeah, there's a person named Israel, right? And yes, it does get named after him because reasons, right? But what ends up happening is that when you have Joshua or Joshua crossing Hayarden, right, or the Jordan River, they still call it Ahatz Canaan, like. And we know, archaeologically speaking, because the Exodus is not really, there's no evidence that it occurred archaeologically, right? But that's not really what matters. What matters is that we know that the Canaanites over time sort of split off into different groups, right? And over time began to focus worship on specific gods, right? And as time went on, you get one group that particularly lives in what was once called Judea, and they focus theirs on a god that also goes by the name El, right? And that's where you get the beginning. But you also see how like the other names for other gods, etc., right, also begin to be amalgamated, right? Hence why you have like Yah is also another name for this, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So, like, for example, hallelujah, right? The Yah means God, right? But then in every name that ends with El, that means something in reference to God. Like Ariel means the lion of God, right? Anyway. And so what you begin to see is this divergence between certain Canaanite tribes and peoples, right? Because I'm very against just using tribe for every group, but that's like my one thing. I refuse to just use tribe to describe everybody. And then you eventually have kind of like a coalescence of these groups into sort of one larger polity that we can now identify as like the ancient Israelites, right, so to speak. But they were just another Canaanite people, right, that later on became monotheistic, right? Like we can see over time that certain things, like for example the non-eating of pork, right, which is something pigs don't like the Levant is not known for like wild boars or stuff like that, because it's actually like the terrain is horrible for pigs. It actually does not work. It's like too dry, too mountainous, too this, too that, and so because of that, like it's already, you can't really raise swine in that area. So that also is shown in the laws as well, right, in both Islam and in Judaism. But it's interesting because when you do have the introduction via trade routes, right, you can start to see, and this is something you see in the what we might call the like trash pits, I guess. But this is often where archaeologists want to often do their most digging, because you can see like what people were throwing away, what they were eating, what they were drinking, what they were etc. Is you can actually start to see like divisions like between different settlements in what is now like Palestine, of people who do not eat pork, right? And because you will find no pork bones at all in any of this whole region, even if they had access to it. And so it's stuff like that, right? But anyway, now we're way back in the past.
We went way back.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, and I think that's so that's an important distinction, because I feel like also from what I've seen with the Maronite communities, it's actually more plural, because right, there's probably, I would imagine over time, because I mean the first, I guess the first sort of when the Maronite when Saint Maron first came over from, I guess at that time was Assyria. It was probably called Assyria at that time. But came over to Mount Lebanon and those communities, and I don't even know if you would say Christianize them, because Christian as a concept wasn't a thing really. That term came about later, but I guess so. I guess you could say made them Christ followers, or like Christianizing is sort of that came later, with the Roman Empire, and of course with colonizing powers like the European monarchies. But so I try to be careful in how I word this, but I guess, would you say that Maronite communities, just like any other large religious community, they have like multiple sects? Some of them are more, I guess, more tolerant and heterodox, and others are much more sort of ethno-nationalist, would you say? And I guess, is there like, even though in the country of Lebanon, like as a nation, right, there's this mandate that your president has to be a Maronite Christian. Like, I guess you can't call them a monolith, or like how, or would you say that there's like a majority like denomination, and then there's like other denominations that are more heterodox? I don't know how it works, but
Yeah.
but that's what it seems to me. It seems like there's like a spectrum of theology among them.
Yeah, no, it's actually a really good point, and that is that the fact is that it is seen as a and again, I want to be very careful with my own wording here, right? But its origin is around 410 CE, more or less, in what was then called Phoenicia. At least that's when you have John. Well, now we would translate it as John, but Ioannis Maron, right? The Syriac monk, that was the first like Maronite patriarch, right? And say Marun, as was the first monastery, right, on the Orontes, which was also called the Cave of the Monks. Which, if you ever go to some of these places, these monasteries in Lebanon and Syria, etc., like they're literally in the mountain, like literally, like they're like on the cliff's edge, and it's amazing. It's scary to get up there, but it's amazing. So one of the things is that it's a particular church, as the Catholics would say. It's in communion with the Pope. It's in communion with Rome, right? It wasn't always, but it is, technically speaking, an Eastern church, right? And its main languages are Syriac and Arabic, right? It historically has used Syriac as its liturgical language, but it also uses Aramaic as well. That's why earlier I was like, well, I get that you use Aramaic, but it's like, anyway. There was a time where the John Maron, around, this was 200 years after, almost 300 years after the founding of the Maronites, you had the election of Ioannis Maron as a patriarch, right? However, this came kind of as a bit of an issue, because later, soon thereafter, about 60 or so years, that's when you have the Greek Orthodox Church at Antioch, which was the first see to be created outside of Palestine, right? Because like I was talking about this yesterday, where like we know that Mary had another son because James held because James held the Council of Jerusalem, and so and it is considered by some to be like an ethno-religious group, right? In the sense that because it's tied to a particular place, and kind of like with like Armenian Orthodoxy, etc., right? Where it's because the church has been so ingrained with a specific space of land, in terms of like in resistance to, or in existing alongside with non-Christian communities, to where they have sort of brought together those two identities, right? And you can see how this can be used later on, right? Because again, I'm not saying that they're an ethno-religious group. I'm saying that there are people that say that it is ethno-religious, right? So what is essentially where most Maronites live, right? Besides Lebanon, is Syria, Cyprus, Israel, and Jordan. And one thing to keep in mind is that it does claim to be tied, like it has this as it were a strong tie to Lebanon. So this is where that ethno-nationalist aspect of the church, right? And I say that neutrally, right? I'm not saying that in how we might say that now, but you can see how that would lead to something like, like in the 20th century. One of the issues is that early on you have the Maronites. So when you looked into the history, did you go into sort of like what the big issue was that sort of initially had them seen as heretics?
Not particularly. I did go into some of the I did go into some of the like what the I forget it. I think it was I was reading more into like their when they existed during like the Ottoman Empire. Well, because the Ottomans I think ruled over that for like almost 800 years, something like that. So I did read into like some of the a lot of the persecution they faced. And then, but yeah, I didn't, and of course, during the time of the Crusades, I guess the Maronites were like on the side of Crusaders, of course, against the Ottomans. But I didn't read about like what was like the initial, I guess because we know that like every church in history, there's been numerous splits. It's like a never-ending flow chart that keeps expanding.
Right. Right.
So I guess like what was the main schism? Because that's what I probably glossed over that or didn't get to that part.
Yeah, no worries.
What was like the main schism?
It was
that developed.
It was that they rejected the Third Council of Constantinople, which I'll just summarize, and again, this is where like the theological jargon starts to come up. They accepted monothelitism. Now, I don't know if you would like to explain kind of what that is. Good,
Yeah, I'm not. I don't know if I'm. I read a little bit about it, but I don't know that I fully understand what that means.
Yeah, no worries.
But yeah, yeah, go ahead.
It's essentially the belief that that Christ only has one will, right? Which is as opposed to diatheletism, which is accepted by most other churches, that he had two wills, right? Divine and human, both 100% at the same time, right? So that's literally what the dispute was. It was a dispute about the will, that like whether or not Jesus was fully man and fully God, and in what sense was he fully man and fully God, right? And it was in terms of will, right? So again, something very specific.
Yeah, I guess were they also I guess in that were they disputing like the divinity of Jesus or what that meant to them versus what that meant to what that meant to Rome or to the Vatican, I guess. I guess was there a difference about that, or did they like have the same idea of Jesus' divinity, or Like I know, and I personally don't get offended by people who say that like Jesus did not have divinity. Like I understand that, like I know in many sects of Judaism, like non-messianic, or if you look at like for example mainline forms of Islam, like they regard Jesus as a prophet, and they also say that no human being can become God or have the power of God. There's a reason, God. There's a reason God is, God is greater, right? So
Right.
than any one person. So that's like, and I get where they're coming from with that. It's like it keeps there's like a humility with that, like a humility before God. But yeah, I mean, and even sometimes I as a Christian myself, I've been looking at because I know that like Protestants will often basically make Jesus out to be God essentially, and say that he was that was an infallible human being. He could do no wrong. But then you see how pastors behave, right? And the stuff they get away with. For example, child SA, right? So they'll get away with that kind of stuff and just ask forgiveness and think they'll wash their hands of it. And it's like, no, you need to face justice and for your actions. So
Right.
so it's like there is that problem of where I feel like divinity often leads to that, or like assuming that humans can be divine in some way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's a very complex topic, but I guess did Baronites like dispute the divinity of Jesus? As far as like in contention with the Roman Catholic Church, or
So the contention was that that it said Christ has two natures, right? Fully divine and fully human. But did Christ have two wills, right? So that is to say, could he have acted in a way that was not part of the like divine will, right? Like could he have acted in a way, right, that was not ordained by God, so to speak, right? That it wasn't right, that he could have actually have acted outside of the divine aspect. Like could he ever act human, right, so to speak, like have like have free will, right? And so the Maronites said no, the obviously everything he does has to have a single will, right? That it said that and it said that it's not so much that he doesn't have human will, it's that will could never be in opposition to the divine will, right? And again, I understand that this might seem very into the weeds, but the main thing is that how human can we, like, okay, now that we've agreed Jesus is divine and human, now how divine and human can Jesus be in the world, right? That's essentially the question, right? And
how does that play out? Like how does that play out in the scripture? And of course it affects how you interpret scripture, how you interpret the life of Jesus and the Gospels, and obviously the prophecies, right? So it changes a lot of the interpretation of like the prophecies from the Tanakh,
right.
of a Messiah, right? So it really does change like the fundamental definitions of that. But I guess like so anyways, okay, so that was the main schism, was like, Maronites said Jesus had a singular will that existed both in the, it was a singular will that drove both the human and the divine nature of Jesus, right? Whereas the Roman Catholics separated the will. Right?
Yeah.
Because Jesus was both divine and human at the same time, coexisting.
Right.
So,
right.
And thank you for the shout out. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. And so it's this break, right, that happens around the year, when was the Third Council of Constantinople? I didn't write down the year. This is in 680, 681, right? But I want to get to kind of where you were sort of speaking to about the Crusades, is that it is in the Crusades, it is during the Crusades, right? That once you have like Raymond of Toulouse, and the reason why I mention him is because he's the one that besieges Tripoli and later goes on to conquer Jerusalem. But the point being that
Tripoli, Lebanon, not Tripoli, Libya.
Right. Yes. Yes.
To be clear on that, of course.
Yes. And the yes. Oh well, actually, if you want to get down to it, there's actually more than two. But yeah. Anyway. No. Anyway. And there's technically two Naples and Nablus, because they're both Neapolis. Anyway. So because the Maronites assisted the Crusaders, right? Because they helped them in their conquest of Jerusalem in 1099, they affirmed their affiliation with Rome in 1182. So what essentially happens is that the Pope sends a crown, which, I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen the papal tiara, but the Pope obviously has some crowns to spare.
Of course, yeah. I actually, and I have disagreements with them, but the pastor of my South Asian church that I go to here, we have our own little sort of diaspora church here, and he actually took his wife and his 3 sons. They all went to, over the summer, they went to Rome. They did like a Europe trip, and they went to Rome and the Vatican, and and in the Vatican he was showing, like, he took some he was showing me some of the photos he took, and of, like, there are so many, like, crowns and there's so many different forms of headdress for the Pope and for other officials. It's like he's a he couldn't believe it, and he's been to seminary and he knew about it, but to actually see that in person, he was like he was like it's like they're treated better than royalty sometimes.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's and you know what's very interesting is actually it's funny that
I want to go.
you want to go to Rome.
Yeah, that's one of the places. Obviously, as a Christian, like, it's kind of sort of pilgrimage, but also, from historical, that get a better historical understanding. Especially because, coming from a Protestant view, like, I know a few people who've done it, Protestant Christians who've done, the Vatican and Rome trip, and it actually, like, when they come back from that, it actually is like they start to deconstruct their Protestantism. A very interesting thing I've noticed with Protestants who've gone to Rome. Really, really interesting.
I forget. Oh, I think.
I mean,
sorry.
The Pope is technically a monarch. Yes, correct.
Yes.
Of the papal state. He's the monarch of the papal state.
And it's funny too because like like there is a train station, a metro station in Rome called Re di Roma, which means King of Rome, and it's like if you sort of think about it for a while, you're thinking like, that's literally referencing the Pope, like that's literally like one of his technical titles, but and also because of his title, because of that, all of the churches in Rome belong to the Vatican. Anyway, that's a whole different story. But one thing I did want to note, since now I guess I'll leave it over to you to sort of discuss the Crusade sides of things. Is it's interesting because the Maronites actually do bring something into discussion into Christianity, or could, right? Because the naming of their like when it comes to the habits of nuns, right? What they name their, like, how they name their stuff is actually interesting, because a lot of the weirdness that's very Islamophobic about like hijabs and everything is that they call like the tunic, like the robe, they call that a jilbab, right? And then the blue then they put on a blue headscarf, and then the nuns put on a black hijab. So like their nuns call it hijab, like they do the hijab, right? And they even, you know what I mean? And I've always found that, because people like to Arabize or Levantize, or however you might want to put it, or just global South, Christianity, right? Like completely take it out of its context each time and try to just, do it in a white suburban, Michigan context. or Wisconsin actually, not Michigan. But but the
Yeah,
point,
because Dearborn. Yeah,
yeah,
we can't
yeah,
forget about Dearborn.
yeah, because I'm thinking of something like that where it's like it's Catholic to wear a black hijab, but if you were to tell that to the like a random like Catholic, they would be no, you know what I mean? Like it's one of those things like oh yeah, it was the Maronites. They're the ones that started the whole like wearing black hijabs, and if you tell them that, oh no, there's no way they could have done that. PB says if the Pope really cared about world hunger, he'd sell a painting to solve it. I mean, look, there are so many paintings. You know what I mean? I mean, look, I, as much as I think, like, having museums are important. I think he could spare a couple. Like one or two. I'm sure he has. He can spare them. Yeah, a nun's habit, habit, and a hijab. Yeah. So you wanted to go into the crusade, so I wanted to let you.
Yeah, or just what I've come to understand of it. So, like I said, I mean, the Maronites were on the side of the Crusaders, and of course, this actually resulted in the Maronites, actually affirming their affiliation with the Holy See. And so this was like I just pulled up a couple articles here. It was in 1182 when this happened, because the Maronites had assisted the Crusaders in battle against you know against the caliphates, right? The caliphates, right? I guess is how you say it. But yeah, and Rome obviously, to commemorate it, they gave the patriarchs, the crown and staff and everything. But one of the interesting things that came up in this was the contact between the Maronite Church and the Latin Church. One of the things that was interesting that I read was that Maronites would actually teach over in France and Italy. They would teach at like monasteries, I guess, and other institutions. They would teach, the languages of well, I don't like the academics refer to them as Oriental. I hate that term. I don't like to use it. But they taught a lot of the Middle Eastern languages and literature at the universities in Italy and France. The Catholic, I guess, church-run universities. So there was this sort of they actually got into European academia, which was interesting to read about. But yeah, during the Crusades, it was like beyond just the military alliance, there was this complete integration of Maronite Christians, of Maronite Christians into the Roman Catholic Church, and I guess that's kind of part of, I guess you could say, Maronites were very important to sort of, I guess, like the European Renaissance and the Enlightenment, because a lot of the influence for that came from the Middle East, from South Asia, from basically the global South. I mean, especially the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment. Sort of I keep telling people, like, because there are people who say, oh, Europe was great, Europe is better than everywhere else because we have the Enlightenment. I'm like, where did you get that Enlightenment from? You got it from Persia, you got it from the Middle East, you got it from Africa. It's like you had to learn from outside. You had to get an outside influence in order to make that progress and to make those advancements, because like one thing that I've read about is like how European cities didn't really evolve in their design until they learned how Middle Eastern cities were designed in like grids, So they actually had to learn from other parts of the world to, because now, of course, today in the world, European cities are considered some of the best designed cities. Not all. Some European cities are a mess. Like, I have a streamer friend of mine, actually, he's in Prague, and he says Prague is an automotive nightmare. It's just cars everywhere. and it's not designed for cars, so it's overcrowded and jammed all the time. Whereas, Amsterdam is an extremely well-designed city. But yeah, I did see how, anyways, back to, but I did see, like, it was just interesting to see how beyond just the Crusades, beyond just integration with the Roman Catholic Church, Maronites were like one of the first. They were some of the first non-European peoples to actually teach in European academia at the time, in the Middle Ages. So they were, I guess, the sort of part of the reason maybe that the Renaissance, started to take hold in Europe. Really interesting.
Right, and we must also remember that it was scholars in the Middle East and in the global South in general, but particularly in Persia, and also later on would even be in the other countries as well, other lands that had actually preserved the works of people as as seen to be as innately European as Aristotle, for example. The Europeans had effectively destroyed pretty much all of the manuscripts that weren't the ones that were preserved in Arabic, for example. So that's the reason why that's the reason why, for example, almost all of the things that Aristotle writes often that you find often has a Latin title as opposed to a Greek one, right? Because it's like de rhetorica, de physica. Why? Because when they had to retranslate it back into a European language, it was from Arabic into Latin, not back into Greek. So
yeah, and people don't think of Aristotle as, oh, it's it must have been written in Greek or whatever. No, it was in Arabic. And it's like people don't associate Aristotle Arabic, but
yeah,
here we are.
and so
Interesting.
one of the things that I think is very important is that from this collaboration that they had, and I mean, again, they had, obviously this is historical, right, with the Crusades, right, and the conquest of Jerusalem in particular, right? That also means that, again, like if you were to type in Maronites on Google, it's gonna give you, one, the Maronite Church, two, Maronites as a ethno-religious group, right? And again, this is why some people, right, I don't think it's necessarily incorrect to say that they are as such, right? But one of the things is that sort of in the 20th century, the decision by some Maronites to sort of other themselves, or not to other themselves, rather to other the rest of the Lebanese people, right? And say, we're not Arabs like everybody else. We're actually, and here's where the kicker is. We're actually Phoenicians. Is another layer.
Which that Phoenicia was, if I remember, I'm trying to remember the old maps, because was Phoenicia, was it south of Anatolia?
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially like everything north of, like it included like the city of Tyre, Sidon, stuff like that.
Oh yeah, okay, that's what, that's basically where modern Lebanon is.
Yeah.
Essentially, or part of it at least. Yeah.
Right. But of course, this was a way for them to say, see, we're not like we're not, I'm not like the rest of the, I'm not like other girls, right? It's that type of thing, right? To essentially say, oh, well, we're Lebanese, but we're more real, like we're more Lebanese than you, right? Like that was kind of the whole thing, right? Like, oh, well, we're Phoenician, see, which is pre-Islamic, right? And it was a way to make this ethno-religious distinction a thing. This is why I say, like, some people consider it to be an ethno-religious distinction, but I'm not saying that it 100% is one or it is not, because it's like it's a bit more complicated than yes or no. And particularly, this is because of the fact that for a while you do have the fact that Arab nationalism did try to did have the Lebanese in general, but even Arabs living in Greater Syria to identify with each other as a whole, because it wasn't based on Islam as such, Arab nationalism, right? Some people added in Islamic elements after the fact, but it isn't necessarily like part of it completely. Another thing is the fact that yes, the most Maronites technically live in diaspora, but that's neither here nor there. Like, I mean, that's a lot of things. Like,
There's a lot of history behind why that is the case.
yeah, yes.
Yeah.
And so this is where we kind of get more into the more modern times, where again, because the French gave privilege to the Maronites over the rest of the peoples of Lebanon, right, and did so on the basis of the fact that like they would allow them to get education, they would allow them to they would speak French, right, they would have access to economic opportunities that never were available for particularly the Shia Muslims, right. This is where you start to get that tension building up, right? And there already was historical tension, but now you get it escalating and escalating and escalating, because now it's occurring with colonialist power there, right? And
colonialists. I guess there was segregation of communities and going on. Like, it wouldn't surprise me. So
right.
I guess that. So during French, because I read some into. I didn't have time to fully get into it, but when the French did the that's and it was particularly around the mandate for Syria and Lebanon. That's where a lot of the that's where I feel like or at least from what I understand, that's where a lot of the segregation of communities happened, which obviously, being South Asian, we know that all too well. Thank you, Great Britain and Portugal and and the French to a degree. The French had Puducherry. Puducherry is in southern India, and in Tamil Nadu and Kerala. Puducherry was a French colony for a while, and then it it obviously got independence, and now it's a what do they call it, a union territory in India. So in India you have states, and then you have union territories that are like former they're like post-colonial sort of, they were colonial protectorates of countries like Portugal and France that then got integrated into the Indian state. So yep, and in Asia, you're talking, the Oceania, right? But anyways, I was saying that, like, how I guess, would you say a similar from what I've been reading about, like the French and particularly with the mandate for Syria and Lebanon, because this was like this is post World War I, but then it kept going until post World War II. I guess, was that when a lot of the segregation happened, or was the segregation already present beforehand? I guess
mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, all I was going to say was, when, after the Maronite Druze conflict of 1860, which is when you get the French essentially saying, we're going to we are the protectors of Catholics around the world. And so we are going to be whatever. So they essentially claim that they are going to have a protectorate over a particular part of Lebanon, which is called Mount Lebanon. Again, and the people that lived in this area was called Ahl al-Jabal, which means literally people of the mountain. Like, that's like al-Jabal means the mountain.
Al-Jabal, mountain.
Yeah. And so what this did is that it began the privileging of the Maronites, right, in relationship to the rest of the people that lived in that land, particularly in the sense that they were the Maronites were the ones that were allowed to essentially were the ones that were allowed to carry arms, for example, right? Which is a very, big thing, right? And they did try to say that, oh, well, we are going to create a sort of organic. I mean, they literally called it règlement organique, right? Which is this idea that, like, oh, well, we are going to impose an organic, like, fixture or fix to this problem of what happened in 1860, where the Druze and some Shia Muslims again attacked Maronite Christians, where they said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to draw this line here. I think we already know where this is going. And so they decided to essentially cut off, right, this Mustafariyat, because it comes from the Mustadif, or governor, right, appointed by the Ottoman Sultan, right. David versus Goliath, probably with a healthy heaping of very science. Oh yeah, for sure, as always. Because, like, people always try to say that, like, oh, well, I mean, look, I've heard it all. I've heard like that like, I've literally read, like, early modern, like from, like, the 17th century stuff, saying that it's quite obvious that the Scottish people are actually one of the lost tribes of the Jewish people, because they're so stingy. I'm not even joking. It's like, wow, like, real high English gentleman thought right there.
That is. Did David Irving write that? He probably did.
I mean, he didn't, but probably one of his ancestors. So what ends up happening is that this Mustasarif, right? I know Hassan would never watch me, but if he did, please correct my Turkish pronunciation. I am more than happy to be corrected, because the governor could not be approved without, and this is the reason why, like, when people try to act like the Ottoman Empire really did have as much control as it did towards the end of its existence, I'm just like, I always come back to this. They could not appoint a governor for this, like, essentially the Christian Franco-Christian Israel. Oh gosh, that just sounds like a horrible nightmare. Blunt rotation. But still,
it's like that in one breath.
Yeah, but they could not appoint a governor for this place. Yeah, Wig is Turkish, so if Wig is in chat. No, I know them from the cathedral, and I also have they're also in the server, in the Rainbow Castle. So anyway, they could not approve a governor unless the other European powers approved of it as well. So this let all of the European powers, not even just the French. This allowed all of the European powers that were it was 6 countries. I'm gonna quickly look to see if I yes, it was the International Commission, France, Britain, Austria, Prussia, and Russia, and the Ottoman Empire counting as the 6th in this case, right?
I mean, that's basically most of the allies of World War One.
Yeah, I mean, it's
right?
Yeah, I mean, like essentially they knew where to strike, so to speak. And so, yes, like the French were the main people that was the main power that was given over this, right? Which again, really shouldn't have happened. I mean, but colonialism is a hell of a drug, it seems. So what ends up sort of happening over time is that, again, you begin to have the Mustafirites, right, who are all Catholics, right? Particularly Ohannes Pasha, who that actually wasn't that actually was a title Pasha in this case, because his name was actually Ohannes Kuyumijan, but that's not important here. Once you have World War One, then it becomes very clear that the wilaya of Beirut might not exactly be on the Ottoman side. And I wonder why that might be. So, because of that, but remember, there was one state in that convention, right, in that group of people, right? There was Austria. So there was another central power on that thing that could technically veto the but I mean, if you're going against Britain and France, you're not gonna have a good time back in the day. They said essentially that fine. Well, what we will do is let's just establish in the Ottoman Empire, and I'm not even joking. Why don't we just start a federal government in the Ottoman Empire? Why don't we just make them have one, right? That obviously was not going to work. What ends up happening is that a lot of the missionaries and such begin to send dispatches back to, because it's separate, because it gained the separation from Syria and is because it has its border drawn this way, is now very much more Christian than it would be if it were part of Syria. It essentially allowed and again, I know that you dislike using this term, but I'm using this term because this is what they were termed at the time, Orientalists, right? Like this was actually and there's this is just like people that studied and but they also did the Orientalism in the negative sense too. So they began to tell the Allies, right, essentially invade here, please. So the Ottomans were like, I think we should send in the military to this this little area here. And so that's what ended up occurring, right? You essentially have the invasion, sort of, if you can even, although it's technically within their own country, of the Ottomans into the government of Mount Lebanon, which again is not all of Lebanon now. It's an even smaller part. It's only where the majority of the population is Maronite. So again, so this does not do anything to endear them to Muslim rule either, obviously. Excuse me. It doesn't help either that that also at the same time, around 1915, when you have the start of the Armenian genocide on one side of the Ottoman Empire, on the other side of the Ottoman Empire over here in Lebanon, you have a famine. And it starts because a literal it was from March to October of 1915, and I kid you not, it happened in Palestine, Mount Lebanon, and Syria, right? And it literally was I'm talking about if when they were flying over, because they actually had photography at this time, so we know it would be it would block out the sun with how many locusts were swarming during this time. And it was actually a result of bad agricultural policy by the Ottomans, that they didn't take care of the stuff that they should have done to prevent. And I'm not going to show the pictures because it shows the victims of from the famine. But then they were like, well, now that, and this happens just after the outbreak of World War One. So it's the war breaks out, now everyone's being conscripted. Boom, there's a literally one of the 10 plagues decides to show up just in time
Yeah.
for the First World
Locusts.
War. Yeah, locusts.
The locusts the locusts are one of the belligerents now.
Yeah, literally. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And not only this, but like I really want to stress this, right? Because this is why like this is why this period in time bears a lot on the psyche of the Maronites in the interwar period and then in their independence period as well, right? Because you also have the fact that the Maronite authorities also did not do anything, right? That this is also the case. Because a lot of them were absentee landlords, right? So they didn't do. But I just want to sort of read the following. So I'm quoting now. Quote, "The locust hatched and multiplied without hindrance, then crawled north, and when they appeared in the sky of Mount Lebanon," again, this is the just one part, sort of like Beirut and north, "the sun was blocked from the population for several days. And when the swarms landed on the ground, they destroyed the plants and crops, leaving the trees barren without leaves or fruit. A large part of these trees soon withered or stopped producing for a long time. Because of the locust, Mount Lebanon was deprived of most of its agricultural production I'm going to add this here, throughout the First World War." End quote.
Jeez.
So it did, this definitely did not help either, right? So I'm putting this context here because we also have to remember, like, why is it that that such a reactionary strain of Christianity then developed, right? Because again, and it's not to say all Maronites, but why was it that there was such a reactionary one, right? And one of the reasons why is because, again, you have these material conditions like what I just read out, right, of which caused a famine, right, which the Ottoman Empire really didn't help at all, actually. And so because of that, you do have the French appointing someone to sort of be the president of the area, right? And that's when you get okay, so the British wanted to take all of the Middle East. Let me just start out with that. They got mad that because of this situation, right? I'm not even joking, like literally because of one of the 10 plagues literally happening, that it allowed France to actually occupy Lebanon and the rest of this what were then called the Syrian states, right? And the reasoning why the French did this, and I kid you not, was to, quote, "save the Christians of the East." Okay.
Of course. I mean, of course, that bordered, right? That bordered British Palestine, and was a threat. Was the British saw the French as a threat, right? In that regard, or like basically the French were in their way, and of course, in the way of their colonizing, right? So, wow, just yeah. Yeah, it did border, right? Yeah, it would have bordered British Palestine. Just trying to find a map. Where is it? Yeah, because I was looking at the mandate for Syria and Lebanon. Yeah, so I could probably screen share, but you've probably seen the map. Like, yeah, it definitely the southern border, the southern borders of the mandate, the Syria-Lebanon mandate. All those states that were created were the northern border of mandatory Palestine. So, yeah.
Right, and then
the British were big mad at that.
And then also Estelle, one last thing. There's this other really good book that I'm gonna put in the YouTube chat as well. If you can find it by any chance, I would be very thankful. But if you can't, that's totally fine. That's not that's not an issue. But this one is one of the books that I recommend when discussing Lebanon, because it's literally The Origins of the Lebanese National Idea, University of California Press, 2013. Very good. It's one of the it's very good at talking about why the national idea diverged, right? Why there is a Christian idea that still exists in the Maronites, and one that is more communal, like one that wants to include everybody, that has kind of been held back because of, like, well, I'll be honest, because of Israel. And then three, I should say, one that does have a more Islamist tone to it. But again, that's, that's neither here nor there in this case. But yes, anyway, as you were saying.
Yeah, so, by the way, I did find it. I found it on JSTOR, so I don't know if my library card will get me access to it, but I'll find some way. But yeah, I also bookmarked that. And the origins of the Lebanese national idea.
Mm-hmm. Because that goes into, because again, if people feel like, oh, I'm going too far into, like, the reason why I want to make sure I'm giving a lot of the historical context is because there's so much that goes on, right, that then allows for people to use, like, memories of a traumatic past to then justify, trauma that then they inflict on other people, right? In this case, Sabra and Shatila, right? And same thing when you have people, that in their nationalist idea involves the, like, removal, quote unquote, of specific groups of people, right? And you have divisions to this day that exist where, oh, if we could just get rid of Hezbollah, well, what does that mean, right? What does that really mean, in the context of all of this? So that's why I want to make sure that we go over quite a bit. So anyway, so one of the things that's sort of at the very end of Ottoman rule is that you do get someone who, Ismail Haqqi, who was known for being very tolerant. He was known for, he worked to improve the conditions of the people of Lebanon. And this is important because, although he was very tolerant and understanding of those conditions, they essentially, well, again, this is right at the end of the World War I, right? And he was religious, right? And he was also known to be very generous in particular. And he also did something that, I'll just put, like, was very based of him. He turned a blind eye to food smuggling. The Ottomans told him to arrest and summarily roadblocks people that smuggled food. I don't know why. I don't know why on earth people would ever want to do that, but I don't know. I don't know. Just to me, I'm like, basically
he was like, if you see somebody, smuggling food, you saw nothing.
Yeah, literally.
It's kind of yeah.
Literally. And he also, one thing that he did that, unfortunately, because this was at the end of the war, that also means the end of him being able to have that position. He went, instead of going to going to people at writ large, right, and asking for them to give money, he went to the most wealthy and said, in effect, right, like, well, if all the working classes are suffering, right, you're going to suffer soon enough as well, right? Like, so he encouraged them, the most affluent in society, to establish associations to aid the needy, right? So instead of kind of like in the United States, where very often they want like somehow the needy to start an organization. I don't know why they will often like try to word things like that, like, oh well, you should start a charity so that way people can help you. It's like, well, no, I mean, but anyway, the point being that he made sure that it was wealthy Maronites that lived in Mount Lebanon, and it wasn't just Maronites, but that he made sure that the most wealthy were the ones who created to facilitate, so that way he wouldn't have to, as it were, like that way food smuggling wouldn't have to be such a big issue, right? That way you wouldn't have to have all of these problems. However, once 1917 occurred, and this is something that again is going to be a recurrence, especially as we come into the 20th century, even further, and then into the 21st. Then there was an economic crisis in the Ottoman Empire, and again, like, remember, like with right now what's happening in Lebanon, there was a was it 2022 when it was the port explosion of Beirut?
Yes, I believe. Yeah, I believe so. That's where like most of Beirut was like. There were like, wasn't there like an entire, or like the main, like people couldn't live in like the main, I guess, like ocean front of Beirut for a long time, at least for a few months or something. It was like a major cleanup as well.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, it was a massive explosion. I remember seeing the videos of like someone up in like a high-rise building in Beirut or whatever, and like all of a sudden, like you could see their camera shake and everything, and then all of a sudden like their window shatters. It's like,
yes,
it's unbelievable. Yeah.
I'm looking at Twitch chat, 'cause for some reason it didn't update until like just a second ago, and so now I'm seeing Keiki Inc.'s Ahand Barat vibes. I'm like, well,
oh yeah, I missed that. Sorry. Yeah. So I guess they were. I guess Keiki, you were referring to. So for those who don't know what that is, what Akhand Bharat is, which I'm gonna put in chat. So Akhand Bharat is something that Hindutva fascists in India will espouse. So it's this ethno-nationalist idea, and basically, like when you were talking about the whole like we're not like the other Lebanese people, that kind of superiority, because I guess you said like Maronites will often say, oh, we're the pre-Islamic people of this land. So that's what Hindutva nationalists will say. They will say Hindus are the real Indians. And that people of other faiths like Buddhism, Christianity, Sikhism, and Islam are not. And they will also. It's weird that they do this because in South Asia itself we have indigenous communities that still practice their faiths that haven't changed for millennia, and have like they and are kind of like disconnected from modern Hinduism, but like these Hindutva fascists who say they're like these ultra nationalist type people, they will disparage the indigenous peoples of South Asia and say they're not really Indian. It's like, wow, but they've been here since the beginning.
Oh my gosh, that is
basically. It's just really, and of course they're racist against South Indian people because South Indian people speak Dravidian languages. Hindutva nationalists consider Dravidian languages an invasion because they have this revisionist history that Sanskrit was the original language of the subcontinent, when that is not the case. Tamil is, or you say, most people say Tamil, but Tamil. If I'm starting to learn how to say words in their language.
Yeah.
But Tamil and Telugu and Kannada, like all those languages in the South are actually much older. So
right.
Yeah. Anyways,
that's
what the whole Akhand Bharat thing is. It's really stupid. And it's North Indian supremacy, basically.
Right, and it's weird because it's like North Lebanese in this case, but do you guys hear Hassan again?
What?
Hassan.
Full of Nick says I'm a certified South Indian. Okay, stop.
Oh my gosh. Because
I would love to learn. I need to learn at least one Dravidian language. So.
I'm very much in the like, if I could learn one language from every major language family and every major sub language family, I would. Trust me, I would. I just don't know if it'll ever happen. Never mind, it was you. Okay. Okay.
Hassan jumped into the Discord call. Okay.
I would be like, oh wow. So about my bad Turkish pronunciation, it's been like 5 years since the last time I practiced. So anyway, so because of the war, and again, this is just like another thing again that actually remember when I was reading a book talks about Lebanese history. Well, technically it's Levantine history as because the book's kind of older, but I like it because it goes into detail into particular villages. But I find it hilarious because it's very clear that an American who's never left, like within 50 miles of where he lives, wrote this book because he described Lebanon having ranches. And I'm like, I'm sorry, partner. There aren't any ranches anywhere near Beirut.
I mean, what was the main? I guess the main crops over there will be like what? Olives, fruits, right?
Yeah.
Just what they eat, literally, or chickpeas.
Just
like what are the main crops? And I guess beef. Beef cattle being raised there.
Yeah, but like even there is some husbandry, but it's very limited because it's like very mountainous. It's not as figs, lamb. I mean mutton would be much more common. Chicken, if we're going to talk about that. But like he was
goats.
He's like, but when he starts to describe like ranches and he's like the ranching culture, I'm like, I don't know what on earth you're talking about, sir. I don't know what you're.
It's interesting because we both live here in Southern California, and a lot of places have the name rancho in front of them, right?
Yeah.
So because they were actually, obviously we had Spanish missions, but then you had after the gold rush. Right, there was this huge expansion of farming in California. So a lot of places are called rancho or whatever. Like, and it's funny because like I don't know if you've ever been to that part of LA that's like really really wealthy, Rancho Palos Verdes. That's like where it's like between LA and Long Beach, and it's all canyons. It's very rugged terrain. And that's where, I don't know if some of you saw in the news recently, Californians will know this, but some of you saw in the news recently where the land in Palos Verdes is actually shifting. It is the fastest shifting landmass in all of the Americas, North or South America, or one of the fastest moving land masses. So there, all those houses built on those canyons and built, near these like deep gorges, they're falling. Like they're literally sliding, so people can't live there. There's no power. The road is shifting and it's closed. But it's interesting because that land used to all be ranches, right? They used to be a bunch of ranchers out there, and then before that, of course, it was the indigenous land of the Tongva people, right? So, if I'm saying that right, but yeah. So I mean, ultimately, it's stolen land, but yeah, it's like. But a lot of places here are called a rancho, and so I guess maybe they thought, oh, like just like here in California, like every other place was a ranch or whatever.
Yeah, like yeah.
Thought of.
Like I'm like, where's this dude from? Like Texas, and he just assumes, yeah, like anywhere where they have like horses, they must have ranches, But so now I want to get to the actual period of the mandate, okay? Because it's actually a really strange story of how it happened. Again, the British wanted to take over all of what the Ottoman Empire. It was a reservation stolen by ranchers. Oh, you mean the Rancho Palos Verdes, that area?
Yes. Yeah. PV was a reservation, and then it got stolen, and Tongva people suffered. They were displaced.
And so what ended up happening is that the British were going to start the land being stolen by the Earth just as it was stolen by the ranchers. Yeah, well. Um, what the British did is they wanted. I've explained this in prior streams, but I want to just go over it really quickly. The British promised a lot of things to a lot of people, so that way they could colonize the entire Middle East. Okay, one of those things was all of the sons of the Hashemites who had rebelled against the Ottomans and were the caretakers of the holy city of Mecca, right? He got kicked out by the family Al Saud, right? The Al Saud family, right? Who still rules Saudi Arabia to this day, right? So when he went to Cairo to make sure that his son still got what they initially were going to give him, the mandate, well, what became the mandate for Palestine, and also Syria. They literally put him in. They literally put. They created this Arab kingdom of the Arab kingdom of Syria, which again, it didn't exist yet. Right, like they were like, like they literally said, yes, there is this kingdom. It has a government, right? But technically speaking, it didn't exist because anyway, more beachfront property.
It was one of their Civ 6 game saves, basically.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah, yes, because what ends up happening is that they raised. So they were in Damascus, and once Ottoman rule in Beirut sort of fell, pretty much on the same day that it did in Damascus, they telegrammed, back in the day, right? Means Trump is speaking. Oh my gosh, no. Imagine. So the governor, right, the governor of the Mount Lebanon area, right, said that he would be willing to give power over to someone else, right, if they wanted to, someone who was not associated with the Turkish government, but instead, that is to say, who was Turkish, and instead gave it to someone who was Arab, right? However, some government officials, quote unquote, decided to elect these two princes from somewhere. I mean, I say that somewhere, but it's because of this, like, again, this country didn't exist. Like, there was no Arab kingdom of Syria. Like, the British wanted to create it, but they kind of, like, were like, yes, the king of Syria. Well, so what ends up happening is Prince Faisal, right, was formed in Damascus, which is the farthest south you can go, because the British troops in the first 10 days of like, actually right now, it actually would have happened around this week, but in 1918 the British army started leaving, like, what was then just Ottoman Palestine, and going up the coastal road there. However, the French stopped, right, all of this, because they decided to land a fleet of ships in Beirut with a whole bunch of soldiers. And so with that, they had the British essentially lower the Arab flag, the flag of the Arab revolt, and return, and they had Shukri al-Ayubi, who was the representative of King or Prince Faisal, in this case, back to Damascus, right? And so so essentially, because the French decided to just go like full ham, and just completely just like, actually, Britain, we're not gonna like just send in the full troops, because they did that, the British were not able to colonize Lebanon, right? They weren't able to claim it, right? The French colonized it instead, but and also the French said that that upon their colonization of it, or their successful taking or holding of it, that the British also had to make sure that all of the Arab governments from Beirut all the way down to Damascus had to be dissolved, right? So they were literally saying, like, literally all of those governments gone. We don't want any of them, right? Because they wanted, obviously, to have a power vacuum, right? And the British were like, oh, like, we
love power vacuums.
Yeah, but they're like super, super upset because they're like, oh, like. So then what ends up happening is once you have that, you have the dissolution of the Arab governments in Beirut, Babda, and essentially the whole coast of what is now Lebanon. And I kid you not, then the French, it was Colonel de Piepap, that was his surname. He literally just starts to appoint French military governors. It's like, you're now going to be the military governor of Tyre. Now you're going to be the military. Like, he just starts giving people, like, power, like, in that way. Like, and they have to be French. Like, they can't be, the indigenous people of Lebanon. It has to be French guys wearing their little hats, right? And he's like, you're going to be the military governor, and, essentially lets them rule it with military law.
Martial law. So basically this region, right, that we now call Lebanon, basically started out of martial law by the French.
Hello, Zach. Welcome in. It's good to see you.
Hey, Zach. I just saw him in chat there. Yeah,
Why are these two colonial powers acting this way? I wonder why. So once they have the Treaty of Versailles, right? That's when you have actually a bit of a scuffle between what the British wanted in the Middle East and what they were signing in Versailles, right? And that is that this is where they begin to create the mandate system, right? But because it hadn't been completely set up, what ends up occurring is that they have a battle, right, between one general, Henri Gouraud, right, very French sounding, Gouraud, and he literally said, if he warned him, he said, if you do not accept the French mandate, I will go and I will, like, fight you, like, but, obviously not like one-on-one, because, Europeans would never do that. He's like, he literally invaded Syria. He invaded the area that Faisal had control over, right, and essentially defeated him with just having a huge French force there, right? And by doing that, essentially, because he didn't take his warning seriously, Gouraud just sent, like, pretty much the entire French army that was in Lebanon. And again, they had just landed their fleet full of soldiers in Beirut, so there was a lot of soldiers just sitting around, so to speak. So
they had the strategic upper hand, right? They had the upper hand.
Right. And another thing too, and this actually goes back to what I was saying earlier, right? When you're in Damascus, you realize that you go down to Damascus from Lebanon, right? Because Lebanon is where the mountains get really, really tall. But Syria is where it starts to get really, really flat, right? In fact, like that's what I was saying. Like, when I was walking up towards the tri-point border between the three countries, or occupied Golan Heights, Syria, and Lebanon, like, it's pretty flat on the Syrian side, which is actually why the Israelis wanted the Golan Heights, because it lets you literally, like, on a perfectly sunny day, if there's not that much smog, like kind of like LA, if there's no smog, you can technically see Damascus from up there, right? So it
Yeah,
gives
it's line of sight for those missiles, you know.
right, exactly.
Literally, yeah.
And so because of that, right? Because of the there are all these mountains sort of around Damascus that don't belong or are currently occupied by other countries, right? In this case, the French, and then now with the Israelis, and so that meant that essentially they had the strategic advantage as well in that sense, and so pretty much what ends up happening is that there was a horrifically violent battle. I'm not even gonna pretend that it was like, oh, typical. The French really did not care. I mean, the fact that he was an Arab prince trying to fight is like, especially because he warned him, like kind of like how the Israelis warned the Palestinians. Did that meant that essentially in his mind that meant he could do whatever he wanted. So I'll just put it at that. I'll just leave it there. And there was a resistance leader that came out of that, Yusuf al-Azma. But then all of Syria, this sounds so weird to describe it in this way, then became owed to the French because of his warning. He's like, if you don't recognize the mandate of us over you, then we get to have the mandate over you and just get rid of you. So all of Syria now was owed, and this is the language they used, owed to the French. And so that's when he decided to. I know, and it's General Gouraud. Gouraud. Yeah, I know, right? Oh, right? No duel, exactly. It's Gouraud who does the line drawing in this case. For Lebanon, he's the one that says, okay, we have the area that's majority Maronite, Catholic, and generally speaking, majority Christian. It's like 80% Christian. However, it's not going to be economically viable if we only keep this small piece of land just along the Mediterranean. So he expands it, right? Because now he can declare parts of Syria, parts of Lebanon, right? And he does. And so that's when in 1920 he makes the French mandate for Lebanon include, right, places like Sidon and Tyre, which are far more south than they would have otherwise have gotten, and are majority Shia, right? So it's because of him that by drawing this new line with the new conquered territory, that a lot of the issues that later on the Maronites will blame on the Shia or on the Palestinians, right, sort of come to fruition. So.
Yeah, in southern, what we now call southern Lebanon, that's where a lot of Druze, if I'm saying that correctly, people live as well, right? That's like where they mainly, that's where they're mainly at. Is that southern part of Lebanon, like you said, in Tyre and I guess there's also the in southern Syria as well, right? Toward Jordan, there's also Druze communities, but it's like they basically colonized Druze people also by dividing things up this way.
Right, and it's interesting too because that I don't know if you remember, but you remember that like maybe it was a few weeks ago that there was this town that Israelis made a big deal because they said that Hezbollah had supposedly launched a rocket and that it hit like a playground with kids there.
Was that I'm trying to remember. I did remember seeing that claim. Was that that was near Sea of Galilee, right? It was one of those towns near Galilee.
It was in the occupied Golan Heights.
Golan Heights. Was it Kiryat Shimona?
It's close to
the one?
it's you're much closer with Kiryat Shmona, yeah.
Okay.
But the main thing being that it was majority Druze town. And what's interesting about a lot of the Druze that reside in the occupied Golan Heights is that they've never accepted Israeli citizenship because they don't want to, right? Because then they know that they will either be seen complicit on one hand with should the land ever go back, and it should go back to Syria and then the Sheba farms to Lebanon. But another thing as well is that there were some Druze communities in kind of like, as you said, closer to the Sea of Galilee, that they did decide to sort of side with the Israelis, and are known for being very supportive units, because they usually form part of their own units of the IDF, because only Jewish Israelis are have to enlist. There really isn't the same for anybody else, but other people can enlist, and Druze, the ones that live in, as it were, mainland Israel, so not the occupied territories, but the part of Israel that I guess the 67 borders, they tend to have a high percentage of participation in the IDF. So
Yeah, actually, this morning I was digging in some more. Before hopping on this, I was reading about because he popped up in my search. You probably have heard of this person, but Gabriel Nadaf.
Yeah.
He's that Israeli Greek. Well, he's Arab, but he's a Greek Orthodox priest in Israel who happens to be Arab, and he's like. He basically founded an organization to recruit Arab Christians into the IDF and all communities of Arab Christian, whether they're Maronites or Druze or Orthodox or anyone else. And he has he has the ear of like most of the Knesset basically, which is really, it's really frustrating. And it's interesting because I was reading criticism of Nadaf, and a lot of people in his very own community, his very own Arab Orthodox communities, Arab Greek Orthodox community, like other clergy are like complaining about him and want him like to not be want him basically demoted from priesthood. So there's a lot of opposition to him within the Arab Christian communities within the region. But like and he makes claims like, quote, Israel is the only place in the Middle East where Christians are safe. I'm like, I wonder where he got that from. And he should know that Armenian Christians and other minority Christian groups are actually persecuted in Israel by settlers, by the IDF, and by the police. So like, he should know that. You'd think he would, but nobody really cares about that. Whereas whereas on like the Palestinian side, Christians and I don't know the full reality, but would you say that on sort of the Palestinian side of things, that Christians, there's like more interfaith coexistence, people are more united because of course they're under occupation, so they, I guess, put a lot of their differences aside, but not always, right? I guess there probably are tensions, but I guess Palestinians have decided to put that aside to at least have like a united resistance to the IDF. But,
I mean again, it's like I go back to thinking of Beit Lechem, right, or Nazareth, right? It's like even in because a lot of those places are also revered by Muslims as well, let alone Jerusalem, right? And that is that like oh gosh, I forget the poet's name, but he in his autobiography he talks about how like one of the things that like prior to 1948 was that because the school that they went to was mixed, that is to say it had Palestinian Christians, Jews, and Muslims, and as well as other people attending it, right? I don't know to what percentages, but it doesn't really matter. That because of that, they actually would get all of the days off. I remember him saying that. Yeah, that they're like, well, since technically it's this, then we might as well just let everybody go home, right? Because then everybody would be like, oh, well, I have an uncle, blah blah blah, right? And so I just remember them saying that, and also saying that like, there was never any. I mean, again, there will always be outliers, and I'm sure people can, oh, what about this example? Fine, but there were like like one probably one of the most famous Palestinian academics ever is Edward Said, who is a Palestinian, who was a Palestinian Christian, right? Whose family was forced out of where they lived, which is actually close to Bethlehem. Again, to the Israelis, they don't care whether you're a Palestinian Christian or not, or a Palestinian Muslim. They care that you're a Palestinian. That's all they care about. And like a lot of the one of the issues, and I don't know if I think this would be interesting to hear your take on it. A lot of the weird mystification, or I don't even know what I would label it as, of evangelicals towards like the traditional rites of like the Eastern churches, right? Like kind of like the Greek Orthodox Church with the Jerusalem Patriarchate, right? Like they really don't like the kind of they kind of almost don't see them as Christians in some way, even though they're the oldest Christians, if anything, right? So
yeah, and it's unfortunately, yeah, and this is a problem in the Protestant space that I I'm trying to address through what little I can do as far as content creation and other things I'm doing, and just not even just content creation, just within my diaspora, within the community that I'm in and the communities that I frequent. I try to imbue people with this thinking that Christianity is not like this. I mean, okay. Through colonialism, right? The Western powers kind of self-affirmed that, that they are like these self-righteous, arbiters of morality in the world and arbiters of like Christianity in the world. But, it's like I know many Christians, both South Asian and non-South Asian, who have done the Holy Land trip. People in my family, I know my grandfather did it years ago, and like this was like he did it in the 70s. This was like before, I think it was the late 70s. This was before like 82. So he was there. He had gone there way back then, and then I've had family members who've gone recently in the last like 10 years, and I've never been. But like, even those people who go on Holy Land trips, it's like I don't understand what level of misinformation there is. They're being fed by tour guides, by the tour groups, and by museums and wherever they visit. Like it seems like they're getting a lot of misinformation or revisionism through that, and they're not. And like then they go to Egypt and they're immediately shocked that there are churches there that are some of the oldest standing churches in the world, in Cairo, in Alexandria, right? When they go to these places, they get surprised that there's these Coptic, and they've never heard of Coptic churches. I'm like, wait, you're a Christian, you've been a Christian your whole life, you've never heard of Coptic churches, like the Coptic Church, or, I guess, well, South Asian people, of course, know that Syrian churches exist because they also came to Kerala, which is it's the most southwestern. It's southwestern India, basically. But yeah, it's like there's this like people sort of compartmentalize Christianity as like this Western thing, and they could never imagine that in Turkey and Iraq and in Jordan and in all these places, their Christianity has been there way longer, or even in present day Iran and Azerbaijan and of course Armenia. I mean, those are some of the oldest Christian communities, and so one of the things I try to imbue in people is like, there's a variety of our faith has not been this singular interpretation. It's not, univocal, right? It's not, what I mean by that is, like, evangelicals will say, oh, well, there's only been one interpretation of the Bible that's correct. And it's like, well, if you went to a Maronite Christian, they would heavily disagree with you. If you went down to Ethiopia to Wahedo Church and talked to the pastor there, they would disagree with you on a lot of stuff. And they're still Christians. They're still followers of Jesus Christ. So,
Right.
So yeah, how do you undo that sort of Western hegemony within the faith, right? How do you undo which is ultimately a function of white supremacy? How do you undo that? And that white supremacy has been ingrained in the global South, in churches that have been established by, say, missionaries or by colonizing powers. The church that my family goes to in India was established by British missionaries, British and American missionaries in the 1860s. That church is still standing. It's beautiful. And there's like a school and stuff associated with it. You know, it's an educational institution as well as a church. And if you enter it, it'd be, I would absolutely welcome you to visit, by the way. You are totally welcome to visit, over there. But this church, you walk in and you, on one wall are the portraits of all of the pastors who have pastored the church since the 1860s.
Oh,
and
wow.
The first pastor was a British guy.
Oh my gosh.
White British guy. Yeah, and then of course all the following pastors were, were obviously mostly North Indian, because I mean this is North India, but yeah, I mean North Indian, whether from UP or from Punjab or wherever, right? So but yeah, the first pastor and the founders of the church were British and American missionaries. And so unfortunately, people in that community still think in this sort of westernized, Western, hegemonic way about stuff. And so they don't understand, that when I, especially with this topic of the Middle East, they get really defensive about Israel, despite their neighbors being Muslims and despite them celebrating Eid with their Muslim friends and family. It's like and going to school with them and working with them, and it's funny because whenever I go visit visit over there, and I stay at my grandfather's house, which he's lived there his whole life, there are 3 mosques nearby, that community of Christians that live there. So, every morning, 5 o'clock, azan, you hear it. It's just normal. It's just everyday life, and, people are used to it. But then when you talk about Israel, they get really defensive, and they spout all the Zionist narratives. And I'm like, I just, how do we undo this? And I think something like, something... I feel like if more of those people read into, for example, take any group of Christians from the Middle East, or whether it's the Maronites or and the surrounding history and context around them, or the Coptic Christians in Egypt, or early Christianity in Africa. That's something I want to get into at some point. But yeah, it's just like I feel like that helps to undo this white supremacy that is so ingrained, and we know why it's ingrained in Christianity, and so that's why, like, as a Christian, I am much more of you could almost say a church abolitionist. Like, I do recognize the importance of, say, church community, or you probably yourself recognize the importance of community in a synagogue or a mosque, any place of worship. It doesn't matter what it is, but there is importance to having community, but also the institution in and of itself. The problem with it is it's become corporatized, and they're trying to push narratives, and they're trying to revise history, and they have certain interests that they're pushing, rather than the community driving it, rather than the community in the driver's seat. It's the leadership, it's the propagandists, it's the state partially that's also driving it. So that's why I'm more of a church abolitionist, because all the institutions I see today pretty much are pushing these narratives, and they're not allowing for a good or even a correct understanding of any of this. So I'm glad you do what you do, and I try to do it as well. And it's just like, how do we get more of those Christians on here? And I know, like, I've seen in your chat, you've seen in my chat, people will come through and spout all the narratives, and we try to change their mind, but it's very hard. It's like you're hitting a brick wall. It's like, when will the first brick, break free? When will it break free?
Right. Right, and it's interesting because PB actually had a point here in the YouTube chat, which you actually kind of spoke to, but their only detraction was the dogma. But Atticus Among Us here also brings up an interesting point about Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch baptism in the Book of Acts. And I don't know if you would like to elaborate a bit more on that in case people don't know that story.
No, I gotta remember it now because I didn't. I have to.
Oh, no worries.
Read it myself.
No worries.
But yes, I can actually probably, let me just look it up. What chapter? In the Book of Acts, Philip.
Because I know.
Is that chapter 8? It looks like it's chapter 8. Yeah, Philip. Yeah. Acts chapter 8. That would be where you'd want to read.
Okay. But yeah, like there is this belief for some reason that like Christianity is like inherently European, but we know that, for example, there was Christianity in India before Christianity ever stepped foot, so to speak, on the European continent. And I think that again, and you have like St. Stephen's Church, right, which is, when I say that, it's the church that was established in what is now called, Iran, right, in Persia. Yes. Right, and then you have the Church of St. Thomas, which is the one in India, right, or as they used to call it, the Malabar Church, although
Kerala in Malayalam,
yeah. And so it's like there's all these like. This is why I think that, like, if the people that do not wish to go into the history of, again, this is what I find so strange, right? Is like this weird like I like this weird ick, I guess, as some people, as the kids say these days, right? Of particularly like the Eastern Orthodox tradition, etc., right? Because it's like it's more, as it were, quote unquote, alien to them, insofar as like it's nothing. It's like people are used to the binary of Roman Catholicism, Protestantism here in the United States, right? That's kind of that is seen as the entire Christian world in many ways. But like when you travel like in the Middle East, the Maronites, their church, like, they are Roman Catholics, technically speaking, but like they also have icons that are more reminiscent of Eastern Orthodox churches, and when you go into Syria and you go to like the Patriarchate of Antioch, that's actually in Damascus, because Antioch doesn't exist as a city anymore. There is a modern city, Antakya, next to it, but the city that it was founded in is now just ruins. But regardless, like if you go there, they actually have like the iconostases, it seems more removed from what they're used to, right? And so that's why I find it very strange when I was betting that Giga Chad would convert to Russian Orthodox once he got exposed to it. You know what, Big Room?
I need to react to his videos.
look, Giga Chad. Like the fact that he would come on video and be like, my family, okay, my great grandfather-in-law, he invented spaghetti. He brought electricity to Italy. It's like, my goodness gracious, have at least a little humility, you know what I mean, just a little bit. But okay, but yeah, no, like, I don't know, this might interest you, because there is, I've mentioned this person before, and his name is Jay Dyer, and he literally is one of the co-hosts on InfoWars, and so
Oh, God.
but he's also known for being like the head of the Ortho Bros online, right? And his server though is so sussy. Like, I'm sorry. Like, look, like they can stay mad, but having underage people doxing themselves so that way you can find a church. I don't know. I cannot verify that is exactly what's going on, but that sounds like a bad idea. I'm just gonna put that out there. It sounds like a bad idea, right? Um, but yes, like it's a part of this thing that too, right? Where it's like they're very nationalistic and everything, but it's because they are formed out of a reactionary church that was formed after um, that was formed once the Soviet Union had defeated the whites, as you know they were called, the White Russians, in New York, the ROKOR, which is the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia, and they are known for being like hyper reactionary, you know, very pro Russia, like Putin, as it were, right? And I think Jackson Hinkle became a member of ROKOR, if I remember correctly. Like
no way.
like at some point, because like at some point he decided to become Russian Orthodox, if I remember correctly. But I think it was ROKOR, which I just don't even. Anyway, but I mean, it's just, you know, embellishment in many ways, it seems. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I do not know the contents of his soul, nor do I want to. So, but point being that, yeah, like Jay Dyer, he does like all of these interesting things where he will like deconstruct or demolish, or you know, like even uses like all of the debate bro language, but particularly for like talking about Christianity, right? And essentially trying to be like, oh, the Orthodox Church is the only real church, and blah 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 blah, you know, all of that stuff, right? And that you know, oh, that this was a forgery, and that well, you know, I've literally heard it all. Like at this point, like you know, when it comes to that, I don't know. That might interest you because again, like he used to. Okay, it's interesting that you said earlier. I don't know what they're teaching at those seminaries. He used to be a seminarian at a Protestant evangelical seminary.
That sort of see, when you describe like sort of started in the evangelical seminary and then ends up being like in this super reactionary, like it seems like they just keep like with time. It seems like there's just like this descent into reactionary hell for these people. Like I just yeah, like I said, I don't know what they're teaching in the seminaries. I actually know one of the Indian pastors here, which I've wanted to talk to him because he's more academic in his approach. He's not as like charismatic. He's more academic. So he is, and he's like aware of the problems of the prosperity gospel and stuff. But he's an evangelical, you know, academic, right? So the thing with him is that like he will, because I had to correct him. Just a little story here. I had to correct him recently on something because he was preaching. He's a guest preacher sometimes at this church, and so he was preaching about you know, we're basically covering like the book of Acts right now, and he was preaching about like how he was preaching one of the chapters from the book of Acts. And he was tying it back to, you know, all the Old Testament stuff. But then he was talking about, I think it was David Livingstone. You've probably heard of David Livingstone. He was a British evangelist who went to Africa and stuff, and, you know, started what they call, what a lot of Christians call is like, they want to minister to unreached peoples, which to me that's kind of racist.
Oh yeah,
racist.
Very.
Yeah, so I don't like using that terminology, but, you know, basically, you know, convert people from sort of the animism and other faiths to Christianity, right? So he claimed that David Livingstone or someone else had discovered the source of the Nile River. I'm like, no, people in Ethiopia and Rwanda and Burundi and like Central Africa, you know, Central and Eastern Africa have known the origins of the Nile for millennia. They know where it is.
Yeah.
In fact, there's two sources, right? There's the Blue Nile and the White Nile, which
Right.
we know today. But, you know, they had other names. And, of course, I actually saw, and I'll send it to you after this actually, but on my stream we watched one lecture, and I sent this lecture to him from I think she's Ghanaian or Nigerian. I think she's from Ghana or Nigeria, one of the two countries. But she's an academic in Britain who, can't you just let him have that one? No, because the I'm Indian. I cannot let the Brits have anything. Okay, but but uh, so but anyways, so there was this lecture, and she was talking about how the Niger River in West Africa has many names because so many peoples live along that river. It's a very long river, and so it has many names in many languages. But then in the African schools, all they teach is that some Andalusian diplomat named the river. It's like that's all they teach in African schools now, and it's like everything's been so colonized over there. The history that students in Africa learn about their own land, like where their ancestors are from, has been colonized to that extent, even to this day. So like I had to correct him on that, and thankfully he backed off and he was like, yeah, I was wrong about that. David Livingstone probably just translated the knowledge into English for English academics. I'm like, okay, now we're good. So it's like I'm having to work continuously. It's a continuous effort to try to first of all decolonize Christianity, de-westernize it, because I do think that not only de-westernize but just de-hegemonize, I guess, is a better term. And so yes, please help Shakespeare with her research. She does a lot. I wish I knew as much as you, because again, I don't have formal training, unlike yourself. I think you said you went to rabbinical school and all that, which I'm not ordained at all. I'm just a member of the community, and my profession is technology. What the knowledge you have in theology and in religion, and in faith, I have in JavaScript and Python. So
I might just have to ask for your help with that, because I swear I have no idea how this
no worries.
how this Meshuggah box works. I don't know. But
no, I know you were talking about the other day. Just let me know, like, whatever you need, as far as, like, I know you needed help with your chat bot and stuff, but I'll help you set that up. But yeah, anyways, like, I guess at the end of the day, it's like that's why I wanted to get into. That's why I really enjoyed this discussion. I know we're almost at movie hour, but on the Discord. But
that's right.
That's why I really enjoyed these kind of discussions, is because I have to work through this stuff with the diaspora I'm from, and then of course there's the wider sort of evangelical community, which they have become, like you said, they're jumping into these reactionary rabbit holes. Like, there's the whole narrative now of how evangelicals, like some evangelicals, are becoming progressives, which there is a progressive movement within evangelicalism as a resistance to Christian nationalism. So you've probably heard of YouTube channels like the New Evangelicals and Letter Hack and some of those people.
Yes.
And there are some theologians like Bart Ehrman and what's his name? I'm blanking on his name. Dan something. He's big on TikTok.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I forget his name. McClellan. Dan McClellan.
Dan McClellan. Oh yeah. I know. Yeah.
He's cool. I love Dan McClellan. He does he actually has helped a lot with this too. So, but like, what a lot of right-wing evangelicals will do is they'll say, oh, evangelicals are becoming too woke and too leftist and all, so now I'm going to go in a more reactionary direction. And so that's probably why they're going to the super reactionary, like, new Russian Orthodox Church or whatever.
Right. Well, I mean,
yeah.
I mean, just to like quickly add on to that, just about like particularly Jackson Hinkle, it's like it's because like one thing that it allows them to do is to like cloak their like anti-Semitism or transphobia or anything, and say, oh well, according to the canons of the blah blah, you know what I mean, like
their faith is their framing device for bigotry,
right?
And I, as a Christian, would say that's not Christ-like. You cannot you're supposed to love others unconditionally, even if they're very different from you. Even in Judaism, right, in the third book of the Torah, which Christians call Leviticus, it's what is it, Leviticus 19:34 or something? I think that's where it says, treat foreigners in your community as one of you, as your own, because you were once slaves in Egypt. So there is that, you were once under captivity, so don't put others under captivity. But
Right.
look at Israel today.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. No. I totally. Yeah. I think it's treat the stranger among you as your own. For recall, that you were strangers too in Eretz Mitzrayim, or the land of Egypt. But yeah. But
I
no.
guess, is that like the Hebrew Bible translation? I need to look at that more.
Yeah, like I can recommend you the one the one I usually use, but because there are ones you can get that have the footnotes where it's like, oh, it'll have like Talmudic / rabbinical commentary, and because there is a Jewish study Bible, that one's very good. But I sometimes feel like, if you have that and then you also do this, you also read this, then you can really get into the understanding kind of why Jewish people kind of don't see eye to eye with a lot of the Christian interpretations of things, because it's just very, very different. But I don't want to hold you any longer because I know you have to get on going. And
I have a few more minutes.
Okay.
So before moving, I guess I wanted to sort of conclude. I'm like, I guess thanks for, first of all, thanks for having me on again. I really enjoyed it last time, and hope to have you on again. My OBS has been cranky too, just like yours was today. So I'm having to, tonight I'll have to go fix it, because tomorrow I actually have to stream, because I have an F1 league race. So I'll have to wheel up and everything. So yeah, it's going to be pretty sweaty. I'm not one of the faster drivers, but hopefully I don't crash and I get a top 10. Hopefully. It's pretty competitive.
Bezos Hashem.
Yes. Thank you. And so I was going to say one last thing though. This is an interesting fact. So we were talking about the Maronite Christians, right? And the sort of the various Christian communities in Syria. So if you look at the Martoma Christians in Kerala in southern India, they have been Christian for a very long time. Now we cannot fully confirm whether Thomas actually went there. The Apostle Thomas actually went there. It's folklore basically, but it's what they accept as the foundation of their community. So I'll respect it. But Thomas the Apostle apparently went there in the 1st century, and so it took Kerala into the subcontinent at that time. And what's interesting is that the Syrian, the Martoma Christians, and the Toma is obviously reference to Thomas, but the Martoma Christians in southern India actually, in Malayalam, they actually borrow a word from the Syriac language to describe themselves. So their term for Christian is Nasrani, which is, I guess I'm saying that right, which means Nazarene, which is in reference to Nazareth, where Jesus is purportedly from.
Yeah.
So what's very interesting is they borrow the Syriac term, the early Syriac term for followers of Christ, Nazarenes, basically, which is very interesting. So this is very different from from the Protestant tradition, where it's the sort of, if you say you're a Christian, that means you're a follower of the Son of God, and it's more attributed to divinity than anything else. But with Monotoma Christians, they still obviously they acknowledge the divinity of Christ, but then their term for Christianity is borrowed from the Syriac term, which is reference to Nazareth, where Jesus was sort of raised, it's like his hometown. So very, very interesting.
Right, and it's interesting too, because the Hebrew term for it is Nutsri, literally same. Because Syriac is also a Semitic language, so you have the same Nutsri, Christian, and then you have as you said, right? And it's just a way to say Nazarene, yeah, like you said, because, in fact, this is an interesting thing, and I can't remember. Gosh, I wish I had the book in front of me, but there actually, there actually was like other in other Semitic languages where before like European colonization, you do see that like the emphasis on Nazareth or the emphasis on other aspects of Jesus as opposed to the ones that have become hegemonic now, right? Netzer, meaning the branch, if I remember the root word. I think you're right, yeah, because Nazareth, because Nazareth is in the part of is up in the forests of Palestine, very high up. So yeah, that would make sense. But yeah,
Syrian Christians were oppressors. I think it. Yeah, I think. Well, I think they had sided with the Portuguese in the colonial eras, like in like the 1500s.
like the Maronites and with the French.
Yep. Yeah. The Syrian Christian, what they call the Jacobite Christians. Also, they call themselves. There's like different factions. There's like there's the Maratoma. There's Jacobite. There's like over time they divided into factions as churches normally do.
Right.
There's the Syro Malabar, Syro Malankara. I think that's what they call themselves. There's the Malabar Independent Syrian Church. There's a Jacobite Syrian. There's like so much going on.
and then what I like best too is the fact that like sometimes like the name itself doesn't tell you what it refers to, because like if people hear Jacobite, right, same thing like Jacobean, and when it comes to England, it's like, oh, that must refer to someone named Jacob. Actually, no, it refers to James. It refers to someone named James. So it's one of those things too, where it's an interesting thing too, where the way how but yes, like all of those different divisions. I mean, again, it's like how like for example, like I've spoken with Dat Katie before, like a while ago, and like for her, and I think this is important, like any form of like orthodoxy, right? Like Orthodox is just one category that includes all only the people that like fully observe the Torah, blah blah blah, right? That like wear the black and white and everything, right? And Ben Shapiro wouldn't fit into that, right? Whereas in the United States, Ben Shapiro calls himself an Orthodox Jew because because in the United States we have the concept of modern Orthodox and free Orthodox, and all of these, so yeah.
Isn't Kaya right? If I'm saying her name right, Kaya Rychek is also some form of Orthodox. I forget exactly.
Yeah,
she's in an Orthodox denomination, right?
Yeah, she.
Orthodox Jewish.
Of the 3 people to come out of the LA Jewish community, unfortunately, they're all really, really bad media personalities, because we have Ben, we have Chaya, and then we have myself, of course. But yeah, like I don't know what's in the water over there in Beverlywood and all that. I don't know. Anyway.
There's also Noah Tishby, right? Because she is like what was the show she was in? This is gossip at this point, but
yeah, that is the Libs of TikTok's lady. Yeah, Chaya.
NCIS. Yeah, she was on NCIS like years ago or whatever, and now like all she does is Zionist activism or whatever, like propaganda.
Yeah.
I don't want to say activism, propaganda.
Yeah, Hasbaha. Hasbaha.
Hasbaha.
Yeah, but yeah, no, yes, yes, Chaya is also modern Orthodox, which all like what modern Orthodoxy was like it was people who wanted to essentially get like all of the benefits of being in the secular world, right? And then in the sense of like, oh, that they could have a secular, like for example, when I was in yeshiva, they actually kind of questioned me if I actually should get a university, like the type of education I wanted, because they said, well, then you might have to read stuff that's technically like against, halacha, right? Stuff that you shouldn't. No, 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 no. Chaya Raichik was not on NCIS. Was what kind of episode of NCIS would that be? Where she would be?
God, it would have ended the show.
Yeah, would have ended the show literally. Yeah, Beverly would. No, no. Look, trust me. If you know the LA Jewish community, you know what I'm talking about. When I say Beverly Wood, you know what I'm talking about, and you also remember Mexikosher. Why is her name Chaya? Okay, well, see, this is what I find one of the great, like, actual irony. Her name Chaya is actually related to the term Chava, which is the Hebrew word for Eve, but in actually because it's not that close to it, it's actually closer to the root word. It actually means life. And I'm like literally a person who tries to bring about the not life of people to have that name is ooh, oy, 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 just a little bit. And yeah. An episode of NCIS, she cries that she got doxxed when she actually did it to herself. Oh my gosh, imagine. Of course, l'chaim, indeed.
Yes. Yeah. Well, anyways, I'll let you get to it. It is almost 3 p.m. West Coast, so it's almost time for the movie. But yeah, it was great talking to you. I have a lot to look into. I've got a lot of tabs open as far as with the Maronites. But actually, this is good because actually it kind of, like I said, I got some parallels out of it with the Maratama community. I actually know some members of the Maratama church here in LA too. So kind of like you, I'm sort of plugged into the sort of religious diaspora here. So and it's a lot of interesting characters, and some are very harmful and others are.
I just hate the. I just hate the fact that they're so like of the ones that I do know. It's like, why does it have to be the Shapiros? Like, get it? It's like. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. Anyway, thank you so much.
Anyways,
thank you very much.
We'll see.
Yes, I'll let you say it.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you so much, and yeah, we'll see you. I gotta eat, but pretty soon I'll join you on the Discord for movie night. And yeah, it was good to be on again, and I'll have to join more often. My work schedule is pretty brutal lately, but yeah, I'll have to join more often, and probably if you're interested, maybe next time we could go into sort of. If you want to, go into sort of how, sort of the Protestant Christianity in like South Asia, and just kind of because it's like an angle of South Asia no one really talks about, but it's like and how it has a lot of the same problems as Protestantism in the West. It's like we sort of inherited a lot of that BS. And so how do we get out of it? So that's something I'd be interested to talk to you about if whenever the time comes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Of
course, whenever we can make it work. Well, anyway, I'll see you soon.
See you soon. Bahut shukriya. And yeah.
Shabbat shalom. Okay. That was good. I think that was good. Everyone. So thank you again, each and every one of you, for being here. For the Twitch side, I am going to, of course, raid out. I want to make sure that y'all get sent somewhere, but we are going to be watching the movie La Chinoise in the Discord. So if you haven't joined the Discord, make sure to do !Discord, so that way we can all watch it together. Now let me see here. Who should I send? Really? Let's go with bye. See you all very soon. Like I said, I'm just trying to find the right person to send stream over, but besides that, okay, there we go. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much, the big room. And so yes, if you would all please get into the machine so we could make sure to say a big hello to our friend Peganox. Make sure to tell her hello for me. I'll see you all very soon. Bye.